No money. Get off. The driver shouted. Old man, did you hear me? Michael Whitmore stood frozen beside the fare box. One hand gripped the metal pole tightly. The other trembled against the front of his coat. My wallet, he said, his voice weak and uneven. My phone. I left them at the hospital. He swallowed hard. The word hospital seemed to catch somewhere in his throat. For a moment, his eyes moved past the windshield at the front of the bus. My son is there, he whispered. He is very sick. I just need to get home. Once I'm home, I can call someone to bring the money. I didn't ask you to tell me your life story, the driver snapped. His name was Frank Mallory. Frank sat behind the wheel of the Route 63 bus, his shoulders slumped beneath his uniform jacket, one hand still resting near the door switch. The bus was stopped along a downtown Chicago curb. The engine rumbled softly. The windows were fogged with the breath of workers, students, nurses, and older people holding grocery bags on their laps. Frank looked Michael up and down with open disgust. The wrinkled wool coat, the loosened tie, the expensive shoes covered in mud and melted snow, the pale face, the red-rimmed eyes, the lost expression of a man who had just been dragged out of a nightmare. Do you have money? Frank asked. That's all I'm asking. Michael blinked. I already told you. I left everything at the hospital. If you let me sit down for a moment, I can... Frank scoffed. Look at you. Clean face, white skin, decent coat, and you still want to ride for free? He leaned forward, deliberately speaking loudly enough for the whole bus to hear. No money, no ride. Get off now and stop blocking everybody else. A few passengers looked away. No one wanted to get involved. Michael turned slightly, embarrassed by all the eyes fixed on him. He reached into one pants pocket, then the other, fumbling in a panic that made him... Exhaustion had made his fingers clumsy. He patted his coat, searched the inside pocket, checked beneath his scarf, then bent toward the floor as if his wallet might have fallen there. When he turned back, his elbow bumped the arm of a woman standing near the front row. She was a nurse in blue scrubs, holding a pharmacy paper bag. Hey, she cried, stepping back. Careful. I'm sorry, Michael said quickly. I'm truly sorry. I didn't mean to. The bag slipped from her hand. A small orange pill bottle rolled beneath the first row of seats. That was all Frank needed. Oh, now you're bumping into people too? He roared. First you won't pay. Now you're shoving passengers. What are you doing, old man? Looking for someone to pickpocket? Michael's face darkened with shock. No, I wasn't. Don't tell me no. Frank pointed straight toward the open door. Cold wind swept into the bus, carrying melted snow across the rubber floor. I've seen this act before. Pretend to be confused, make people feel sorry for you, and next thing you know, somebody's wallet is gone. The nurse bent down to pick up the pill bottle. Her expression was annoyed, but not cruel. He only bumped into me by accident, she muttered. I didn't say he stole anything. Frank ignored her. Sir, please, Michael said, and the word please came out choked. My son is in the hospital. I haven't slept at all. I don't know where my driver is. I don't have my phone. I just need to get home. Then walk. Michael stared at the open door. My home is far from here, he said. I can't walk that far tonight. Please. If you take me to my stop, someone from my house will come out and pay you. I promise. I'll pay the fare, extra for the delay, anything you want. Frank's mouth fell open, then he threw his head back and laughed. You all hear that? He said to the passengers. This man thinks this is his private car. A few people looked away again. Frank looked at Michael. Are you crazy? This is a public bus, not your personal vehicle. You can't stand here saying, drive me home and my people will pay you at the gate. What kind of nonsense is that? Michael's hand tightened around the metal pole. I'm not trying to cause trouble. Then stop causing it. I'm asking for help. And I'm telling you, everybody who gets on this bus has a reason. Some people are late for work. Some people have sick kids. Some people have rent due. You think you're special because you look sad and wear a nice coat? Michael lowered his head. No. Good. Then get off. I can give you my name, Michael said quickly. Michael Whitmore. If you call Northwestern, they can confirm I was just there. My son is lying in. I don't care if your name is Michael Whitmore or George Washington. Frank slapped the steering wheel. You are standing in my doorway without paying. Michael's voice grew smaller. Please, just this once. Frank leaned forward, his face hardening. Old man, don't make me leave this seat. Get off the bus before I throw you somewhere you really don't want to go. Michael turned away from the driver and faced the passengers. For the first time, he truly saw the people inside. The nurse holding the pharmacy bag. The young man wearing a Chicago Bulls cap. The elderly woman with a cane, a construction worker with a lunch cooler on his lap, and two college students sitting close together, sharing one pair of earbuds. He turned to the nurse first. Ma'am, he said quietly, I'm sorry I bumped into you. I truly am. Could you lend me the fare? I will pay you back. I can give you my name, my address, anything you need. The nurse's face tightened. I'm sorry, she said. I don't carry cash. Michael nodded quickly, as if trying to make her refusal easier. Of course, I understand. He turned to the young man in the bull's cap. Sir, just enough for the fare. I'll pay it back. The young man pulled out one earbud. Man, I don't know you. I know you don't. But I'm not lying. I just left the hospital. My son, everybody's got problems. The young man put the earbud back in and looked down at his phone. Sorry. Michael turned to the elderly woman with the cane. She looked at him with pity, but her gloved hand had already tightened around the small purse on her lap before he could say anything. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said, his voice trembling. I shouldn't have asked you. The woman swallowed. I only have my bus card, dear. That's all right, Michael whispered. Thank you. Frank laughed loudly from the front. Look at that. Now he's passing the collection plate. Michael ignored him. He stepped carefully down the aisle, still searching through his pockets between each plea, as if one forgotten coin could save him from this humiliation. His shoulder lightly touched the construction worker's lunch cooler. Please, Michael said, could you help me with the fare? I'll pay you back 10 times over. The worker shook his head without looking up. I can't, I've got my own kids to feed. I understand. No, you don't, the man said, not angrily, only plainly. But good luck. Michael moved toward the two college students. One avoided his eyes. The other gave an awkward shrug. Sorry, sir. We paid with cards. We don't have coins. The farther Michael moved down the rows, the smaller he seemed to become. His voice sank lower. His shoulders dropped a little more. The bus no longer needed to push him out. Shame itself was driving him back toward the door. He placed one hand on the back of a seat to steady himself. He looked as if he might fall. He was not begging like a con man. He was begging like a father who had knocked on the last door and found no one willing to open it. Anyone? He said, his voice barely loud enough now. Please, I just need to get home. No one answered. From the front, Frank called down the aisle. Are you done with that embarrassing little performance? Michael turned toward the front. His lips moved, but no sound came out. At the back of the bus, Annie Brooks quietly watched him move from one person to another. She had just finished a long shift at a diner 2 blocks from Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Her black slacks still carried the faint smell of frying oil. In her coat pocket, she had a handful of coins. She had counted them twice at the bus stop beneath the weak yellow light. $2.25, enough for one ride home, and that was all she had until payday. Annie looked at Michael's hands. They were still shaking. Frank slapped the steering wheel once. All right, the show is over. Get him off. Michael took one step forward, then stopped. The bus door remained open, waiting for him. Outside, snow covered the sidewalk in white. He looked down at the pavement as if it were miles away. That was when Annie stood up. Driver, Annie said. Frank slowly turned his head. What now? I can pay his fare. Michael immediately turned to look at her, startled. No, miss, please. You don't have to do that. Annie stepped into the aisle. Her shoes paused for 1 second on the wet rubber floor. I said I can pay. Frank looked her up and down, from her tired shoulders to the frayed cuffs of her coat. An unpleasant smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. Oh, wonderful, he said. Another hero. A few passengers shifted slightly, but no one laughed. Frank leaned back in his seat and folded his arms across his chest. Why don't you worry about your own empty stomach first? Annie felt heat rise all the way up her neck. She was hungry. That was the worst part. Frank had guessed right. Or maybe he had seen enough girls like her on late buses to know. She walked to the fare box. Michael reached out slightly, then pulled his hand back, as if even his gratitude might embarrass her. Please, he said softly. I can't let you do this. Annie did not look at him. You're not letting me, I decided. Frank snorted. Touching. Very touching. Drop the money in, or both of you get off. Annie reached into her coat pocket. The coins had grown warm from being held for so long. She took them out and opened her palm. Under the bus lights, they looked even smaller than they had at the stop. A few dull quarters, a few dimes, a few nickels, and 1 penny that had been in her pocket for weeks. For a moment, she thought of the back counter at the diner. She thought of the half sandwich the cook sometimes left wrapped in foil if the place had been busy. Then she dropped the first coin in. Clink. The sound was small, but it seemed to quiet the air inside the bus. Another coin fell. Clink. Then another. Clink. By then, no one was speaking. Even Frank stared at the fare box, his jaw tight as if he wanted to say something but could not find a sentence that would not make him look worse. 1 coin stuck to Annie's palm. She had held it so tightly that its edge had left a mark on her skin. She loosened it with her thumb and dropped it in. Clink. The machine accepted the full fare. The small screen lit up. Frank glanced at it, then said, not loudly but firmly, "Fare paid." He rolled his eyes. "Fine. Sit down. And don't ask for a refund later when you remember you're completely broke." Annie quietly slipped her empty hand back into her pocket. Michael stared at her as if he had forgotten how to speak. "Thank you," he finally said. "Thank you, I'm sorry. I don't even know what to say." "Then don't say anything yet," Annie replied. "You look like you're about to fall over." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." The words were not exactly gentle, but there was care in them. "Take it slow," she said. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, ashamed that he needed help. "I'm sorry. You already said that." "I say it a lot." That answer caught Annie off guard. She led him to the seat she had left near the back of the bus. People made room with small, embarrassed movements. The young man in the bull's cap pulled his legs back. The construction worker shifted his lunch cooler aside. The elderly woman lightly touched Annie's wrist with 2 fingers as she passed. "Bless you, baby," she whispered. Annie nodded, but kept moving. Michael sank heavily into the seat. He braced both hands on his knees, breathing through his mouth, his face still pale. Annie sat down beside him, one hand gripping the overhead rail. Frank shut the doors and pulled back into traffic too hard, making half the bus sway. "Hold on," he called, as if the rough start were anyone's fault but his. The city began sliding past the windows again. For a long while, Michael said nothing. Then he spoke, almost as if he were talking to himself. "My son's name is Ethan." Annie looked down at him. "He's only 16, Michael said. "He should be worrying about his driver's test, not whether the next treatment will work." Annie had heard sentences like that in hospitals before. "Is anyone with him?" she asked. Michael nodded, then shook his head, as if both answers were true. "A nurse. Maybe my sister. She said she would come." He swallowed. "She usually sends flowers when she doesn't know how to show up." Annie understood the kind of sentence that carried more history than explanation. "My mother used to care for elderly people," she said. "Some families do that too. Send flowers, send money, send everything except themselves." Michael looked up at her. For the first time, his eyes truly focused. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Annie," she said. "Annie Brooks." "Annie Brooks," he repeated carefully. "And you?" He paused. The silence was strange, almost embarrassed. "Michael," he said. "Michael Whitmore." The bus rolled past another stop. A few passengers got off. A few more stepped on. Life kept changing seats around them. Michael leaned forward. "Annie, how can I find you? I need to repay you." "It was just bus fare." "No." His voice was softer but more certain. "It was not just bus fare." She did not answer right away. Outside, the snow was falling harder beneath the streetlights. "My stop is coming up," she said. "Please. At least let me pay back the money you spent." Annie looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into the side pocket of her backpack and took out a folded diner receipt. On the back, she wrote her name and the name of the diner with a pen that was nearly out of ink. "I work there most evenings," she said, handing it to him. "Don't make a big deal out of it." Michael held the paper with both hands, as if it were an important document. "I won't." The bus slowed. Annie pulled the stop cord. The bell rang above them. Before she left, Michael called, "Annie." She turned back. "Why did you do it?" She gave him the simplest answer. Because nobody deserves to be left behind just because they're short the exact amount someone asked for. If this moment touched your heart, please like this video. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. And share whether you believe one small act of kindness can change a life. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about compassion, dignity, and justice. The rear doors opened. Annie stepped down into the snow with no coins left in her pocket. No dinner waiting for her at home. And no idea that the trembling man behind the bus window could buy the entire bus company before breakfast if he wanted to. Michael watched her disappear under the streetlights. Her shoulders curled against the wind, and her old backpack swung lightly at her side. The paper with her name on it trembled in his hand. The bus carried Michael farther north, but his mind stayed at the stop where Annie had stepped into the snow. He kept the diner receipt open on his palm. The ink was faint because the pen had nearly died while she wrote, but the name was clear enough. Annie Brooks. Under it, the name of the diner, Rosie's Corner Grill. Michael read the words again and again as if they might disappear if he looked away. Around him, passengers settled back into their own lives. A phone buzzed. Someone coughed into a sleeve. The nurse with the pharmacy bag stood at the next stop and glanced at him before stepping off. For a second, it looked like she wanted to say something. She didn't. The doors folded shut. Frank Mallory kept driving, his eyes flicking once to the mirror. "You got your fare paid, old man. Don't start any more trouble." Michael did not answer. He had spent his life answering men like Frank with lawyers, phone calls, signatures, and power. But tonight all of that was somewhere else, locked inside a forgotten wallet and a phone left behind at the hospital. Tonight, he had only his name, his grief, and a scrap of paper from a girl who had given away her last coins. He looked down at his hands. They were still trembling, but not as violently now. A few stops later, the older woman with the cane leaned across the aisle. "Your boy," she said. Michael looked up. "Sir? Your son. You said he's sick." Michael nodded. "Yes." The woman's face softened. She was wrapped in a brown wool coat, the kind that had seen many winters and refused to give up. Her gloved hands rested on the handle of her cane. "I lost mine in '09, she said. "Not the same thing, maybe. But I know what it is to walk around after bad news and not know where your feet are taking you." Michael swallowed. "I'm sorry." "So am I." She looked toward the back door where Annie had left. "That girl did right by you." "She did." "Then don't waste it." Michael did not understand at first. "Waste it?" The woman tapped her cane once against the floor. "Some folks receive kindness and turn it into a story they tell at dinner. Some receive it and become different. You look like a man who still has a choice." Before he could answer, the bus slowed. The woman stood carefully. Michael rose halfway to help her, but she waved him off. "Save your strength," she said. "Sounds like you're going to need it." She stepped down into the cold, and the bus moved again. Michael sat back and closed his eyes. Ethan's face came to him at once, not as he had looked that afternoon, pale against the hospital pillow, but as he had looked 2 summers earlier, laughing on the edge of Lake Michigan with a basketball tucked under one arm and his sneakers full of sand. Michael had been on a call that day. He remembered that now with a sharpness that hurt. Ethan had shouted, "Dad, come on," and Michael had held up one finger, the universal sign of fathers who think one more minute will not cost them anything. One more minute had become years of one more minute. The bus turned, and Michael opened his eyes. He almost missed his stop. It was not the stop closest to his house, not exactly, but close enough that someone in the neighborhood might recognize him. He pulled the cord, then stood too quickly and had to grip the pole. Frank glanced at him. "This where your castle is?" Michael looked at him through the mirror. For a moment, the old Michael almost returned, the Michael who could make a man regret his tone with one call. But another image came first, Annie standing at the fare box, taking Frank's insult and giving kindness anyway. So Michael only said, "Good night." Frank scoffed. "Yeah, sure." The doors opened. Michael stepped down onto the snowy curb. The bus pulled away, throwing slush near his shoes. He stood beneath a streetlight, disoriented by the cold and the quiet. Houses stood back from the road behind iron fences and bare trees. The neighborhood was familiar, but in his condition even familiar things seemed arranged by strangers. He walked 2 blocks before a black SUV slowed beside him. "Mr. Whitmore?" The driver rolled down the window. It was Harold, one of the older security men from Michael's estate, a retired police officer with a gray mustache and a habit of calling everyone, "Sir," even when angry. "My God, sir, we've been looking everywhere," Mrs. Bell called from the house. "The hospital said you left without your phone." Michael stared at him. "Harold, get in before you freeze." Michael climbed into the back seat. Warm air hit his face. The leather smelled faintly of cedar and polish. It should have comforted him. Instead, it made him think of Annie walking home with empty pockets. Harold looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Do you need to go back to the hospital?" Michael closed his eyes. "Not yet. Take me home. Then call Northwestern. Ask for Ethan's floor. I need to know if he's sleeping." "Yes, sir." The SUV moved through quiet streets toward the Whitmore estate, a limestone house set behind black gates near Lincoln Park. Lights glowed in tall windows. A wreath still hung on the front door, though Christmas had passed 3 weeks earlier. Michael's wife used to keep decorations too long because she said January needed mercy. Grace had been gone 4 years. He had not thought of that sentence in a long time. January needs mercy. Inside, the house was warm and still. A housekeeper hurried into the foyer, followed by Mrs. Bell, his personal assistant, wearing a cardigan over her pajamas and holding his phone in one hand. "Mr. Whitmore, thank God," the hospital called. "Your wallet and phone were found in the consultation room. Your driver waited at the north entrance for 40 minutes. We were terrified." Michael took the phone but did not look at it. "How is Ethan?" Mrs. Bell's expression changed, softer, careful, resting. "The nurse said he asked for you once, then fell asleep. They told him you stepped out to make calls." Michael nodded, but the lie hurt. Ethan knew him too well. His son would know he had not stepped out for calls. He had run out of strength. "Do you want something to eat?" Mrs. Bell asked. "Soup? Tea?" "No, sir, you haven't eaten since morning." He almost said he was not hungry. Then he remembered Frank's voice. "Worry about your own hungry stomach first." He remembered Annie's empty pocket. "Bring anything," he said quietly, "and sit it in the kitchen. I may come down." Mrs. Bell looked surprised. Michael Whitmore did not usually eat in the kitchen. Grace had. Ethan did. Michael took meals in rooms designed for men who believed time was too expensive to spend at a table. He walked into his study instead. The room overlooked the winter garden. Shelves of awards lined one wall. Framed magazine covers hung near the fireplace. There were photographs of buildings he had purchased, hospitals he had funded, ribbon cuttings where he stood smiling beside mayors and surgeons. On the desk was a silver-framed picture of Ethan at 12, holding a science fair trophy. Michael picked it up. "I'm trying," he whispered, though he was not sure whether he was speaking to Ethan, to Grace, or to himself. His phone buzzed with missed calls. Richard, Claire, 3 board members, 2 doctors, his driver, the hospital, Mrs. Bell. He ignored them all and placed Annie's receipt on the desk. Rosie's Corner Grill, Annie Brooks. Mrs. Bell appeared in the doorway. "Sir, I need you to find someone tomorrow." She stepped in. "Who?" "A girl named Annie Brooks. She works at Rosie's Corner Grill near Northwestern, South Side, I think. She was on the bus tonight." Mrs. Bell's eyebrows lifted, but she did not ask too quickly. She had worked for Michael long enough to know when something had moved beneath the surface. "May I ask why?" Michael looked at the receipt. "She paid my fare." Mrs. Bell waited. "I had no wallet. No phone. I was standing there like a fool, and the driver was throwing me off." His mouth tightened. Everyone watched. "She paid for me. That was kind of her." "No." Michael sat slowly behind the desk. "Kind is when people give from what they can spare. She gave from what she needed." Mrs. Bell said nothing. Michael opened the center drawer and took out his checkbook, then paused. A check seemed too simple, almost insulting. How did a man repay the moment someone kept him from being cast into the cold? How did he put a number on the first human hand extended to him on the worst night of his life? He wrote nothing. Instead, he looked at Mrs. Bell. "Find her address if you can. Quietly, legally, no pressure. And call Mr. Gaines in the morning." "The attorney?" "Yes." Mrs. Bell's face sharpened. "Is there a problem?" Michael looked at Ethan's photograph again. "There has been a problem for a long time," he said. I just didn't know its name until tonight. Mrs. Bell glanced at the diner receipt on the desk. And its name is Annie Brooks? Michael folded the paper once, carefully, and placed it beside Ethan's photograph. No, he said. Its name is what happens when people with everything forget how to see people with nothing. He leaned back, exhausted, but his eyes were clearer than they had been on the bus. Tomorrow, he said, I'm going to thank her properly. By morning, the snow had turned the edges of Chicago soft and gray. Annie Brooks woke before her alarm, not because she had slept enough, but because hunger had a way of pulling a person out of dreams. The apartment was quiet except for the old radiator knocking in the corner and the low murmur of the television in the living room. Her mother must have fallen asleep in the recliner again. Annie lay still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling. The night before returned in pieces, the driver's voice, the old man's shaking hands, the coins dropping one by one, the empty pocket afterward. She turned her head toward the small desk beside her bed. Her work shoes sat underneath it, drying on a folded towel. Her backpack leaned against the wall, one strap repaired with duct tape. On top of her notebook was a grocery list her mother had written in careful block letters. Eggs, bread, laundry, soap, apples if on sale. Annie sat up and rubbed her face. She had no coins left, no cash at all. Her next paycheck was still days away. She could ask her mother, but Linda Brooks had been stretching money thin enough to see through it. Annie knew the sound of her mother's sigh when she opened the electric bill. She knew which cabinet held canned beans for hard weeks. She knew that pride did not fill a stomach, but it did help a person stand straight when the world kept trying to bend them. From the living room, Linda called, "You awake, baby?" "Yeah. You want toast?" Annie smiled a little. That was her mother's way of saying there was not much else. "I'll take some." Linda Brooks stood at the stove in her robe, hair wrapped in a scarf, one hand on her hip while she waited for the toaster to pop. She was not an old woman, but caregiving aged people in quiet ways. Her knees hurt when it rained. Her hands smelled faintly of lavender soap and antiseptic. She took care of elderly people in their own homes, bathing them, feeding them, listening to stories their children were too busy to hear. She looked Annie over when she came in. "You got home late. The bus was held up." Linda turned from the stove. "Held up how?" Annie opened the fridge even though she knew what was inside. Half a carton of milk, mustard, leftover rice, and a bowl covered with foil. Some man didn't have fare. Driver was being nasty. Linda watched her daughter's back. And I paid it." The toaster popped. Linda did not move right away. "With what money?" Annie closed the fridge. "The coins I had." "The coins for your ride home?" Annie leaned against the counter. "I got home. That is not what I asked." The apartment filled with the smell of toast, a little too dark at the edges. Linda put both slices on a plate and set it on the table. She did not yell. Linda rarely yelled. Her disappointment came quieter than that, which sometimes made it harder to bear. "Annie, he was sick, Mama. Not like fever sick, like broken. He said his son was in the hospital. The driver was going to throw him out in the snow." Linda's face changed at the word son. She pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. "What kind of man?" "I don't know. White. Maybe rich. Maybe not. His coat looked expensive, but he didn't even know where his wallet was. He kept saying he left his phone at Northwestern." Linda pushed the plate toward Annie. "Eat." Annie sat. "You mad?" "I'm a mother. That means I can be proud and mad in the same breath." Annie picked up the toast. "That doesn't sound fair. Most true things don't." For a minute they ate in silence. Linda drank coffee from a mug with a faded church logo. Annie chewed slowly, aware that one slice had become breakfast and maybe lunch. Linda finally said, "You did a good thing." Annie looked up. "But good things still cost something," Linda continued. "That's why they matter. Just don't go thinking you're made of iron. You're allowed to need help too." Annie nodded, though she did not fully believe it. She had spent most of her life learning how not to need too much. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from Rosie's Corner Grill. "Can you come in early today?" "Lunch rush." Marcus called off. Annie stared at it, then typed, "I'll be there." She did not mention she had no bus fare. Across town, Michael Whitmore had not gone to bed at all. He had sat in his study until the sky outside changed from black to pale blue. At some point, Mrs. Bell brought coffee he did not drink and toast he did not touch. His phone lay face down on the desk, still flashing with missed calls. Ethan's photograph stood beside Annie's folded receipt. The two objects seemed to accuse him in different ways. At 7:30, Mrs. Bell entered with a folder. "I found Rosie's Corner Grill," she said. "Small place near the hospital. Annie Brooks is on the schedule this afternoon. I also found a residential address. But I want to be clear, sir. We should be careful. A young woman may not appreciate strangers showing up at her home." Michael looked up. His eyes were tired but steady. "You're right." Mrs. Bell seemed relieved. "Then we contact her at work?" "No, work is public. If I show up there, I make her business, everyone's business." He tapped the desk once with his finger. "I'll go to her home, but not with a crowd. No press, no security at the door. Just Harold in the car and you with me. And if her mother tells us to leave, we leave." Mrs. Bell nodded. "And Mr. Gaines?" "On his way. May I ask what you intend to offer her?" Michael opened the drawer and took out his checkbook. He had written the number at 3 in the morning and stared at it for nearly an hour afterward. Mrs. Bell glanced down when he turned the check toward her. Her lips parted. $1 million. "She gave me what she had. Sir, she paid a bus fare." Michael's jaw tightened. "No, she paid when everyone else decided my humiliation was easier to watch than interrupt." Mrs. Bell sat across from him, choosing her words. "A gift that large may frighten her. It should change her life. It may also make her feel purchased." That landed. Michael leaned back. Grace would have said the same thing. Not as gently, perhaps. His wife had possessed a talent for kindness that did not flatter foolishness. Mrs. Bell softened her tone. Gratitude from a wealthy man can feel like pressure, even when he means well. Michael looked toward the window. The garden was white with snow. For years, he had solved problems by making them disappear under money. A late invoice, a lawsuit, a political favor, a wing of a hospital that needed his name on it. Money moved, people thanked him, and the world went on pretending the wound had closed. But Annie had not given him money. She had given him mercy. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Go humbly," Mrs. Bell said. "Offer, don't impose, and speak to her mother with respect." Michael nodded. A knock came at the door. Mr. Gaines, the family attorney, entered in a charcoal overcoat, carrying a leather briefcase, and the expression of a man accustomed to bad news before breakfast. "Michael," he said, "Mrs. Bell said this was urgent." "It is." Mr. Gaines sat. Michael handed him the check. The attorney read it, then looked over his glasses. "You are giving $1 million to a girl you met on a bus last night." "Yes, because she paid your fare. Because she treated me like a human being when I had no way to prove I was worth treating that way." Mr. Gaines exhaled through his nose. "That is a moving sentence. It is not a legal strategy." "I don't need a strategy." "You always need a strategy when a large sum of money leaves your hand, especially now." Michael knew what now meant. Ethan's illness, the board's nervousness, Richard and Claire circling every decision like hawks looking for weakness. Mr. Gaines continued. "Your brother has already called me twice this morning." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "He heard you went missing last night. He is concerned." Richard is never concerned. He is either counting or positioning. Mrs. Bell looked down, hiding a reaction. Mr. Gaines closed the checkbook. "Then understand this. If you hand this girl $1 million check without documentation, your family may use it to question your judgment." Michael stood. "Let them." "Michael, no. I have spent 6 months watching doctors measure my son's life in numbers. Blood counts. Survival rates. Treatment windows. I am tired of numbers being the only language in the room." He picked up Annie's receipt. "This girl gave me $2.25 when it was all she had. If my family thinks gratitude is insanity, that says more about them than me." The attorney held his gaze for a long moment, then opened his briefcase. "Fine. Then we do it properly. A written gift letter. No conditions. No expectation. No media. I'll prepare language stating you are of sound mind and acting independently." Michael sat again. "Thank you. I am not agreeing that this is wise. I didn't ask for wise." "No," Gaines said, removing a pen. "You asked for clean. By late morning, a black SUV pulled up near Annie's apartment building on South Prairie Avenue. It was not the largest building on the block, nor the worst. The brick was old, the front steps salted unevenly, and someone had tied a blue ribbon around the railing where paint had peeled away. A child's bicycle leaned against the wall, one tire flat. From an upstairs window came the sound of gospel music turned low. Annie was pulling on her coat when someone knocked. Linda glanced toward the door. "You expecting anybody?" "No." Another knock, polite this time. Not a landlord knock, not a neighbor knock, something careful. Linda wiped her hands on a dish towel and went to the door. Annie stood behind her. When Linda opened it, Michael Whitmore stood in the hallway holding an envelope, Mrs. Bell a step behind him. He looked different from the man on the bus. Cleaner, rested enough to stand straight, wearing a dark overcoat and polished shoes. But Annie recognized the eyes. No tailor could fix that kind of tired overnight. Michael removed his glove. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Mrs. Brooks, my name is Michael Whitmore. I'm sorry to come unannounced." Linda did not move aside. "Whitmore?" "Yes, ma'am." Annie frowned. The name still floated somewhere outside, meaning. Michael looked at her. "You paid my fare last night." Linda turned slowly toward Annie. Annie whispered, "That's him." For a second, nobody spoke. Then Linda opened the door wider, not warmly, but with manners older than suspicion. "You can come in," she said, "but whatever this is, say it plainly." Linda Brooks stepped aside, and Michael entered the apartment as if he knew he had not earned the right to stand there. The place was small, warm in patches, and clean in the way working people kept homes clean when they could not afford new things. A folded blanket lay over the arm of the couch. Bills were stacked beneath a salt shaker on the kitchen table. A church calendar hung beside the refrigerator with 3 dates circled in red. The room smelled of toast, coffee, and lavender soap. Michael noticed all of it without meaning to. Not because he was judging, because after the night before, details had started to hurt. Mrs. Bell remained near the door. She gave Linda a respectful nod. "Mrs. Brooks." "Miss Brooks," Linda corrected, not sharply. "I'm not married." "My apologies." Linda accepted that with a small nod, then looked back at Michael. "You said you came because Annie paid your fare." "Yes, ma'am." Annie stood near the counter with her coat half-zipped. She looked ready for work, and also ready to run if this turned strange. Michael could not blame her. Yesterday he had been a shaking man without $2. Today he stood in her kitchen wearing a coat that probably looked like a month of rent. "I should have asked before coming," he said, "but I didn't want to make a scene at your workplace." Linda folded the dish towel in her hands. "That was considerate. Now say what you came to say." Michael looked at Annie. "Last night, I was not myself." Annie's eyes stayed on him. "I figured that much. My son is at Northwestern. Ethan, he's 16. He's been sick for months, and yesterday the doctors told me the treatment may not be working the way we hoped. I walked out without my wallet, without my phone, without even knowing where my driver was. I got on that bus because it was moving in the direction of home." Linda's expression changed at the mention of a sick child, not softened completely, but altered. Mothers understood certain sentences before they were finished. "I'm sorry about your son," she said. "Thank you," Michael swallowed. "When the driver humiliated me, I had nothing to defend myself with. No money, no phone, no proof. I was just a man blocking the door. Then Annie paid for me." Annie shifted her weight. "It was just $2.25. Michael shook his head. "No, it was everything you had." That made Linda look at her daughter. Annie glanced away. Linda's voice dropped. "Annie, I was going to tell you. You did tell me. You left out the part where it was everything." Michael closed his eyes briefly. He had not come to get Annie in trouble. But truth had a way of walking into rooms before anyone invited it. Linda turned back to him. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate you coming to say thank you. But my daughter has to get to work. I understand. I won't take long." Michael held out the envelope. "I brought this for her." Annie did not take it. Linda did. She opened the flap with the caution of someone expecting a trick. Her eyes moved across the paper inside, stopped, then returned to the number as if the first reading had betrayed her. The color drained from her face. Annie stepped closer. "Mama?" Linda laid the check on the table. Annie looked down. For a moment, the apartment went so still that the radiator knocking in the corner sounded too loud. $1 million. Annie read, barely above a whisper. Michael stood with his hands at his sides. Yes. Annie looked up fast. No. He had expected shock. He had expected tears, maybe disbelief. He had not expected the answer to come so quickly. Miss Brooks? No. She stepped back from the table. I paid a bus fare. You did more than that. No, I didn't. I saw a man being treated wrong, and I had enough to stop it. That's all. That is not all. Linda picked up the check and held it between two fingers, not admiring it, not fearing it, but measuring what kind of danger could come folded in expensive paper. My daughter's kindness is not for sale, Mr. Whitmore. Michael nodded slowly. Miss Brooks, I know that. Do you? Linda's voice stayed controlled. Because rich people sometimes think money cleans up whatever made them uncomfortable. Somebody helps you, you write a check. Somebody suffers, you put their name on a building. Somebody embarrasses you with their goodness. You pay them so you can stop feeling the weight of it. Mrs. Bell looked at Michael, but he did not defend himself. Linda placed the check back on the table. Annie gave you what she had because that is who she is. You hand her this. And by tomorrow folks will say she planned it. They'll say she saw a rich white man and found her chance. They'll say her mama raised her to take advantage of grief. You may not mean to bring that to our door, but money like this brings company. Annie had been staring at the check. Now she looked at her mother, and the fear on her face told Michael that Linda had named something the girl had already felt. I didn't plan anything, Annie said. I know that, Michael said. But they won't. He had no answer ready. In boardrooms, Michael always had answers. In courtrooms, attorneys prepared them. In interviews, staff shaped them. But in this kitchen, with $1 million check lying beside a chipped coffee mug, every easy sentence sounded cheap before it reached his tongue. You're right, he said finally. Linda's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if she had not expected surrender. Michael continued, I came here thinking gratitude should be large enough to match what Annie gave me, but maybe I mistook size for meaning. Annie glanced at him then. He looked at the check. I don't want to buy your kindness. I don't want to turn it into a transaction. I only know that last night, your daughter stood up when every other person stayed seated. I was the one at the door, but she was the one with something to lose. Linda said nothing. Michael took a breath. If she refuses the check, I will respect that. If she wants it torn up, I will tear it up. If she wants time, she can take time. No condition. No cameras. No story from me. Annie's phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. Another message from the diner. Linda noticed. You're late? Almost. How are you planning to get there? Annie did not answer. Linda closed her eyes. The truth had arrived again, simple and inconvenient. Michael spoke carefully. May I at least arrange a ride to work? Annie shook her head. No. Annie, Linda said. No, Mama, I'm not getting in his car. I don't know him. Michael respected that answer more than she knew. That is fair, he said. Mrs. Bell can call a regular cab, paid in advance. You don't have to ride with us, or I can leave cash for bus fare. Annie's pride rose. I don't need. Yes, you do, Linda said quietly. The words stopped her. Linda put a hand on the back of a chair. Needing help is not the same as begging. You gave help last night. Don't act like you're too proud to receive what you offered. Annie looked at her mother, wounded because the lesson was true. Michael took out his wallet, then paused and looked to Linda first. May I? Linda studied him for a long second. For bus fare. Not a performance. Yes, ma'am. He placed a $20 bill on the table, not in Annie's hand. Annie looked at it as if it were louder than the $1 million check. I'll pay it back, she said. Michael almost said no, but caught himself. If that matters to you, then yes. It does. Then pay it back someday by helping someone else get home. That answer did not insult her. She nodded once. Mrs. Bell stepped forward gently. Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Gaines asked me to remind you about the hospital call at noon. At the word hospital, Michael's face changed. The room saw it. The billionaire disappeared, and the father returned. Annie noticed the way his hand moved toward his coat pocket, as if searching for a phone he now had but still did not trust himself not to lose again. Is your son awake? She asked. I don't know yet. You should call. I will. Linda picked up the check and slid it back into the envelope. She handed it to Michael. Take this with you. Michael accepted it. though disappointment crossed his face before he could hide it. Linda added, "I didn't say no forever. I said not like this. Not today. Not while my daughter has to go pour coffee for people who may see her face online tomorrow and decide who she is before she opens her mouth." Michael went still. "Online?" Annie frowned. "What do you mean?" Linda nodded toward the window. "There's a man across the street been holding his phone up since they pulled in." Mrs. Bell moved to the curtain and looked out. Her expression tightened. Michael turned toward the window but did not approach it. "Damn it." Linda's eyes sharpened. "Language. I'm sorry." Annie stepped beside her mother and looked through the gap. A man in a gray hoodie stood near the corner, phone pointed toward the building. The black SUV at the curb had already drawn attention. Michael's jaw set. "I'll handle it." "No," Linda said. "That's what worries me. Men like you handle things loudly." He looked back at her. "This time," Linda continued, "handle it carefully." Michael nodded, chastened. "You have my word." Annie grabbed her backpack. "I have to go." Michael moved aside from the doorway. "Miss Brooks." She stopped. "Thank you again." She looked at him, then at the envelope in his hand, then at the 20 on the table. "Go see your son," she said. "That's thanks enough for today." Michael watched her leave the apartment with her mother following her to the door. He had come to give Annie Brooks $1 million. Instead, he left with the check still in his hand, a lesson in his throat, and the first clear understanding that gratitude, if it was going to mean anything, would have to become more than money. By the time Annie reached the sidewalk, the man with the phone had already lowered it, pretending he had been filming the snow. She knew better. People had a way of becoming busy with their screens when they were caught doing something ugly. He turned toward the corner store, shoulders lifted against the cold, but the damage had likely been done. A black SUV outside a tired apartment building. A white man in an expensive coat. A young black woman coming out after him. The internet could build a whole courthouse out of 10 seconds of video and never invite the truth to testify. Linda stood in the doorway behind Annie, arms folded tight across her robe. "Call me when you get to work," she said. "I will. And take the 20. Annie looked back. "Mama, don't start with me on these steps." Annie sighed, went back inside long enough to take the bill from the table, folded it once, and slipped it into the side pocket of her backpack instead of her coat. It felt less like accepting it that way. Michael had stepped into the hall with Mrs. Bell, but he kept a respectful distance. He looked as if he wanted to say something and knew he had used up his right. Annie gave him a small nod. "I'll pay it back." "I believe you," he said. That was all. She walked toward the bus stop with her head down, not because she was ashamed, but because the wind cut hard between the buildings. Still, she felt eyes from windows, from the corner, from the old man outside the liquor store, who always knew everyone's business by noon. By the time the bus came, she had already imagined 3 versions of the story people would tell, and none of them had her in it as a person. At Rosie's Corner Grill, the lunch rush had started early. The bell above the door kept snapping open and shut. Fry oil popped in the kitchen. Plates slid across the pass. Coffee burned in the pot because nobody had time to make a fresh one. Marcus, who had supposedly called off sick, was sitting at the counter eating fries. Annie stopped behind him. "You look terrible." He grinned. "Spiritually, I am. Move before I tell Mr. Alvarez." Marcus lifted both hands and slid off the stool. "Yes, ma'am." Mr. Alvarez, the owner, looked up from the register. He was a short man with silver hair, a bad knee, and a habit of calling every young person kid, even if they had children of their own. He had run Rosie's for 29 years and believed coffee should be hot, eggs should be cheap, and people should not be rushed when they were eating alone. "You're late," he said. "I know, I'm sorry." He studied her face, then pointed toward the back. "Clock in. Table 6 wants more coffee, and Table 9 thinks pancakes happen by prayer." Annie tied on her apron and moved. For 2 hours, work saved her. Work did that sometimes. It did not fix anything, but it gave the body clear instructions. Fill the cup, clear the plate, smile if you can. Keep moving if you cannot. Near 1:30, the first whisper came from booth 3. "That's her, right?" Annie heard it but kept pouring coffee. A woman in a beige coat held her phone low beside the menu. Her friend leaned in. "I saw the clip." "That billionaire guy?" "That's the girl." Annie's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Mr. Alvarez noticed from behind the counter. His eyes moved to the women, then to Annie, but he said nothing yet. At table 6, an older man with a newspaper looked over his glasses. "You the young lady from that video?" Annie placed his check on the table. "I don't know what video you mean, sir." He turned the phone toward her. There it was. The clip was short, shaky, and already framed by someone else's words. "Billionaire visits Southside girl after bus incident. $1 million thank you?" It showed Michael's SUV outside her building. Then Michael leaving with Mrs. Bell. The camera caught Annie stepping out afterward. Linda in the doorway. It did not show the bus. It did not show the coins. It did not show Frank's voice, Michael's shaking hands, or Annie's empty pocket. It showed just enough for strangers to think they understood. The old man was not unkind. He seemed curious, maybe even pleased. "Good for you," he said. "Hope you got paid." Annie looked at him. He must have realized how it sounded because his smile faded. "I didn't mean—" "I know," she said. Though she did not know that at all. By 2 o'clock, 3 more people had asked. One wanted a selfie. One left $5 on the table with a wink and said, "Don't forget us little people." A college student near the window whispered, "Must be nice," as Annie passed with a tray of soup. Mr. Alvarez finally came out from behind the counter and took the coffee pot from Annie's hand. "Office," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything." "I know. Office." His office was barely larger than a pantry, crowded with invoices, a radio, and a framed photograph of his late wife standing in front of the diner when the sign was new. Annie stood by the door because there was no second chair. Mr. Alvarez sat heavily and rubbed his knee. "Tell me what happened." Annie did. Not all of it, but enough. The man on the bus, the driver, the fare, the visit that morning, the check she had not accepted. Mr. Alvarez listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back and blew out a breath. $1 million, he said. I said no. "I heard you. You don't believe me?" "I believe you." He looked toward the dining room through the little square window. "But people out there believe whatever keeps their lunch interesting." Annie looked down. "Are you firing me?" "What?" "No." He frowned like she had insulted him. "Kid, I'm telling you to take the rest of the day. That's the same as losing money. I'll pay the shift. You don't have to." "I know what I have to do." His voice softened. "Your mother would skin me if I let reporters bother you in here." That almost made Annie smile. He opened the drawer, took out an envelope, and counted cash into it. "And take food home. Chicken soup, cornbread. Don't argue. It's slow after lunch anyway." "It's not slow. It is now because I said so." Annie took the envelope because refusing kindness twice in one day seemed rude even for her. When she came out of the office, 2 customers looked away too quickly. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. A message from a classmate. "Is this you?" Another from someone she barely knew. "Girl, get that bag, lol." Then an unknown number. "You should be ashamed taking money from a grieving man." Annie stopped walking. The tray in her hand tilted. A spoon slid to the floor. Mr. Alvarez saw her face and came around the counter. "Go out the back." "I'm fine." "No. You're working too hard to look fine. Go." She left through the kitchen, past the dishwasher, past the cook who silently handed her a tied plastic bag of food. Outside, the alley smelled of grease, snow, and old cardboard. Annie leaned against the brick wall and took her first full breath in hours. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda. "You okay?" Annie typed, "I'm fine." Then she erased it. She typed, "People are being weird." Linda replied almost immediately, "Come home." Annie looked at the message for a long time. Going home would mean admitting the day had beaten her. Staying out would mean pretending it had not. Before she could answer, a black sedan turned into the alley too slowly to belong there. Annie straightened. The rear window lowered, and Mrs. Bell looked out, her face calm but concerned. "Miss Brooks?" Annie stepped back. "How did you know I was here?" "Mr. Alvarez called Mr. Whitmore's office. He was worried about reporters. I came alone." Annie looked at the driver, then at the empty back seat. "Where is he?" "At the hospital with his son." That softened her suspicion, though not completely. Mrs. Bell held up both hands slightly. "I'm not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I only came to tell you the video is spreading. and Mr. Whitmore is trying to have his legal team handle it carefully. Handle it how? By finding out who filmed it, who posted it, and whether anyone is making false claims. Annie laughed once, without humor. False claims already found me. Mrs. Bell's face changed. I'm sorry. You keep saying that for him. This one is from me. Annie looked away toward the mouth of the alley. Cars moved on the street beyond it, ordinary and indifferent. I don't want to be famous, she said. I don't think fame is what this is. What is it then? Mrs. Bell considered the question. Exposure without protection. Annie looked back at her. That's what money usually prevents, Mrs. Bell said, and what poor people are expected to survive. For the first time, Annie saw something behind the woman's polished coat and careful voice. Not pity. Experience, maybe. Mrs. Bell reached into her bag and took out a card. This is my direct number. You can call me, or your mother can. You do not have to speak to reporters. You do not have to answer strangers, and you do not have to decide anything about the check today. I already decided. You decided today. Tomorrow may feel different, or it may not. Both are allowed. Annie accepted the card. From the street, someone shouted, Annie, Annie Brooks? A man with a camera stepped into the alley. Mrs. Bell's posture changed instantly. She opened the car door and stepped out, placing herself between Annie and the camera with a calmness that was almost frightening. She is not giving a statement, Mrs. Bell said. Just one question, the man called. Did Michael Whitmore offer you money? Annie's stomach dropped. Mrs. Bell did not raise her voice. She is not giving a statement. Did you know who he was when you paid his fare? Annie froze. That was the question. The ugly one. The one that turned mercy into strategy. Mrs. Bell glanced back. Miss Brooks, go inside. Annie wanted to obey. Instead, she heard Frank's voice again. Another hero. Worry about your own hungry stomach first. She stepped beside Mrs. Bell, not in front of her. I didn't know who he was, Annie said. The camera swung toward her. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't ask what he had. I saw a man being thrown out in the cold, and I had the fare. That's it. The reporter pushed closer. So you deny targeting him? Mrs. Bell's voice sharpened. That is enough. But Annie answered anyway. You can't target a man you're trying not to watch fall apart. The reporter blinked, surprised by the sentence. Annie turned and went back through the kitchen door before he could ask another question. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her throat. Inside, the cook looked at her and said, You good? Annie shook her head. No, she said, but I'm going home. By evening, the clip from the alley was online too. This time her own voice was attached to the story, but even truth did not travel clean once strangers got hold of it. At Northwestern, Michael sat beside Ethan's bed, watching his son sleep under a thin hospital blanket. Mrs. Bell had sent him the video. He watched Annie's face on the small screen, saw the way she stood in that alley, with fear in her eyes and dignity in her spine. Ethan stirred. Dad? Michael put the phone away at once. I'm here. Ethan's eyes opened halfway. You look mad. I am. At me? No. Then don't make that face in here. It scares the nurses. Michael almost laughed. It came out broken. Ethan studied him. What happened? Michael hesitated, then told him about the video, the questions, the way people had begun turning Annie's kindness into suspicion. Ethan listened, pale and still. When Michael finished, his son said, So fix it. I'm trying. No. Ethan's voice was weak but clear. Don't fix it like a rich guy. Fix it like a man who remembers what it felt like when nobody helped. Michael looked at him for a long moment. Outside the hospital window, snow moved through the city lights. I will, he said. And this time, he knew a check would not be enough. Michael stayed beside Ethan until the boy drifted back to sleep. The room had settled into the late-night rhythm of the pediatric oncology floor. Soft shoes in the hallway, the beep of monitors, a cart rolling past with clean linens, a nurse lowering her voice before entering. Michael had spent enough nights there to know the sounds, but knowing them had not made them easier. Hospitals had a way of making rich men ordinary. Every father in that hallway waited under the same fluorescent lights. He stepped out carefully, closing the door without letting it click. Mrs. Bell was waiting near the vending machines with a tablet in one hand and a paper cup of coffee in the other. She offered the coffee. He took it, though neither of them believed he would drink it. How bad? He asked. She did not pretend to misunderstand. The alley clip has been reposted by 3 local pages. One morning show has requested an interview. A few larger accounts picked it up after someone identified you. Michael looked down the hall toward Ethan's room. And Annie? Her name is out there now. So is the diner. Not her address, at least not widely, but people are digging. His hand tightened around the cup until the lid bent. Get ahead of it. We're trying. But there's another problem. Michael looked at her. The driver. Frank Mallory? Yes. He gave an interview to a local podcast host about an hour ago. Audio only, but it's spreading. Mrs. Bell tapped the tablet and lowered the volume so it would not carry down the hall. Frank's voice came through tinny but recognizable, wrapped in fake innocence. All I did was follow policy. The man was confused, maybe unstable, and the girl jumped in real fast. Too fast, if you ask me. People act like I'm the villain, but drivers see scams every day. I don't know what she knew, but I know what I saw. Michael's jaw hardened. Mrs. Bell paused the audio. He's implying she targeted me. Yes. She didn't even know my last name. I know that. Then why is anyone listening to him? Mrs. Bell gave him a tired look, because suspicion is easier to sell than decency. Michael looked at the tablet again. Where is the bus footage? Transit Authority says they are preserving it. They won't release without formal process. Then formal process them until they remember how fast lawyers can move. I already called Mr. Gaines. Call him again. Mrs. Bell did not move. Michael. He heard the warning in her tone, not defiance, restraint. What? You are angry. You have reason to be. But if you go after Frank publicly tonight, this becomes a rich man crushing a bus driver. That may feel satisfying for 10 minutes. It will not protect Annie. He hated that she was right. So what protects her? Evidence. Sequence. Patience. Patience is what people ask for when they are not the ones being dragged through mud. Mrs. Bell's eyes softened. I know. Michael looked at her more closely. Do you? She was quiet for a moment. My father drove a city bus in Cleveland for 22 years, she said. Most drivers are decent people doing hard work for not enough thanks. Some become hard because the job teaches them to expect the worst, and some were cruel before they ever put on the uniform. She glanced at the tablet. Frank Mallory is trying to hide inside the first group. Michael let that sit. What was your father like? Strict, tired, fair. A faint smile passed over her face. He kept rolls of quarters in his glove compartment, said no child should be put off a bus at night because they were short. Michael looked away. The coffee had gone cold in his hand. Across town, Frank Mallory sat at his kitchen table in a small brick duplex near Midway, wearing a stained t-shirt and the expression of a man who had convinced himself he was the injured party. His wife, Darlene, stood at the sink, rinsing a plate she had already washed. You should have kept your mouth shut, she said. Frank stabbed at his phone. So now I'm supposed to let them call me racist? Let some billionaire and that girl make me look like a monster? Darlene turned off the water. Did you say what they say you said? I was doing my job. That's not what I asked. Frank pushed back his chair. You didn't see him. Man gets on looking like he slept under a bridge. No fare. Bumping into people. Talking nonsense about his house and his driver. I got a bus full of passengers. I got a schedule. And the girl? Frank's mouth tightened. She wanted attention. Darlene dried her hands slowly. Frank. What? She paid the fare. That's not attention. That's money. He looked away. She made me look bad. No, Darlene said. You did that part yourself. Frank's phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. Union rep says don't talk more. CTA, reviewing complaints. Frank cursed under his breath. Complaints? Darlene asked. Old nonsense. People complain about everything now. But he knew they were not all nonsense. The elderly man he had put off 2 stops early because he smelled like urine. The teenager whose pass had not scanned. The mother with 2 children and a stroller who had cried when he told her she needed an extra fare. He had told himself each time that rules were rules. It was easier that way. Rules did not wake a man at night. Darlene watched him read the message. Frank, tell the truth before somebody else tells it for you. He laughed without humor. Truth? The truth is nobody cares about a driver until they need someone to blame. No, the truth is you were mean to a man because you thought he was nobody. Frank stared at her. Careful, he said. She picked up the plate and set it in the cabinet. I have been careful for 30 years. Maybe that's why you forgot what honest sounds like. Back at the hospital, Michael called Mr. Gaines from a quiet family room where old magazines sat untouched on a side table. The attorney answered on the second ring. You saw it? Michael asked. I heard the driver's statement. I want the footage. I filed the request and sent a preservation letter. We may need a subpoena if they stall. Get one. It's nearly midnight. Then wake a judge. Gaines sighed. Michael, this is not television. No, it's a young woman's reputation. That line will work well later. For now, listen, we can push hard, but Mrs. Bell is right. If this looks like intimidation, it damages Annie. Michael sat down heavily. Everyone keeps telling me what not to do, because you are used to doing everything at once. I don't have time for slow. You have no choice. The driver has made claims. We answer with proof, not outrage. Michael looked through the glass wall at the hallway. A father in pajama pants walked past carrying a stuffed dinosaur and a cup of vending machine soup. His face had the hollow look Michael recognized now. What about Annie? He asked. I can assign a lawyer to her, but only if she agrees. We cannot make her our client like she's an asset we acquired. I know that. Do you? Michael closed his eyes. I'm learning. Gaines was silent for a second. Good. Learn quickly. The next morning, Annie woke to her phone buzzing against the floor. She had fallen asleep on the couch, still in her work pants, with the bag of soup from Mr. Alvarez on the coffee table. Linda had covered her with a blanket sometime after midnight. There were missed calls from unknown numbers, messages from classmates, and one voicemail from a reporter who sounded cheerful enough to be dangerous. Annie deleted it. Another message came in from Marcus at the diner. Yo, don't check comments. So, of course, she checked. The first few were kind, then came the others. She knew who he was. Had to. One bus fare and now she wants millions. Why is it always a race thing? That driver was just doing his job. Annie put the phone down and pressed both hands over her face. Linda came from the kitchen with coffee. I told you not to look. You didn't. I was going to. Annie almost laughed, then didn't. Linda sat beside her. Mr. Whitmore's assistant called. She said the driver is talking. I saw. She also said they want to help us get a lawyer. Annie turned. A lawyer? Mama, I didn't do anything. Exactly why you might need one. Annie stared at the dark TV screen, where her own reflection looked tired and older than it should have. I paid a fare, she said. How did it become all this? Linda touched her daughter's knee. Because some people can forgive a good deed only if they can find a bad reason behind it. Annie's eyes burned, but she refused the tears. I don't want his money. I don't want cameras. I don't want lawyers. I want to go to class and work and not have people look at me like I'm either a saint or a thief. I know. What if Frank keeps saying I planned it? Then the truth better learn to speak louder. Annie looked at her mother. Linda took a sip of coffee. And no, that does not mean you go online yelling at strangers. There was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. Linda stood first. Stay there. She looked through the peephole, then opened the door partway. Mrs. Bell stood in the hall alone, holding a folder and a paper bag. I'm sorry to come early, she said. I brought breakfast from a place that is not owned by Mr. Whitmore, not photographed, and not part of a strategy. Linda looked at her for a long second, then stepped aside. You're learning. Mrs. Bell entered and placed the bag on the table, trying. Annie remained on the couch. Is he here? No. He's with Ethan. That mattered. Annie hated that it mattered, but it did. Mrs. Bell sat only after Linda nodded toward a chair. The driver has made public claims, she said. Mr. Whitmore wants to release the full footage as soon as we get it. Until then, we'd like to offer legal help. You can say no. You can choose your own lawyer. You can tell us to leave. Annie folded her arms. And what does your lawyer want from me? Nothing except permission to protect you from false statements. People already made up their minds. Some did. Some are waiting for permission to believe the truth. Linda opened the breakfast bag and took out biscuits wrapped in paper. That sounds pretty, but is it useful? Mrs. Bell nodded once. If we get the footage, yes. Annie looked at the folder. What's in there? Frank Mallory's interview transcript. A list of the claims he made. And a draft statement that says you did not know who Mr. Whitmore was, did not ask for compensation, and have not accepted the check. I have to prove I didn't plan to be kind? Mrs. Bell's face tightened. I wish you didn't. Annie stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street looked the same as it always had. Parked cars, dirty snow, a woman pulling a grocery cart over the curb. Her world had not changed shape, but people were suddenly staring at it. "I'll read it," she said. "I'm not signing anything yet." "That's wise." Annie glanced back. "Don't sound surprised." "I'm not." Linda handed Annie a biscuit. "Eat before you fight the world." Annie took it. At Northwestern, Ethan was awake when Michael returned from a call with Gaines. The boy's skin looked almost translucent in the morning light. His IV line ran from a taped hand to a machine that hummed beside him. "You look like you're planning a war," Ethan said. Michael sat down. "Maybe a small one. Over Annie. Over the truth." Ethan considered that. "Same thing, maybe." Michael leaned forward, elbows on knees. "The driver is lying about her." "Because he's scared?" "Probably. Scared people do ugly things." Michael looked at his son. "You sound like your mother." "Good. She was smarter than you." This time Michael did laugh, softly. Ethan smiled, then winced as if even smiling cost him. "Dad." "Yes?" "When the footage comes out, don't make it all about him being bad." Michael frowned. "He was bad. I know. But if it's only about one bad driver, people get to pretend the rest is fine." Michael said nothing. Ethan took a shallow breath. "Ask why nobody helped. Ask why Annie had to be the one. Ask why people thought it was normal to watch." Michael stared at his son, feeling both pride and pain rise so sharply he could barely separate them. "You should be worrying about getting better," he said. "I can do both." "No, you can't. You're 16. "Exactly," Ethan said. "I'm young. I still think people might listen." Michael reached for his son's hand. Ethan's fingers were cold. "I'll get the footage," Michael said. "And then?" Michael looked at the hospital window, at the city beyond it, at all the streets where buses carried tired people past one another every day. "Then," he said, "we make sure nobody gets to bury what she did under what they want to believe." By noon, the story had grown legs of its own. It walked through newsrooms, group chats, break rooms, hospital elevators, and bus depots. It picked up opinions from people who had not been on the bus and certainty from people who had not watched the footage. By the time Annie finished reading Mrs. Bell's draft statement at the kitchen table, strangers had already decided what kind of girl she was. Linda stood at the sink, washing the same mug twice. "You don't have to sign today," she said. "I know. You don't have to sign at all. I know that too." Mrs. Bell sat across from Annie, hands folded over her notebook. She had removed her coat but still looked ready to leave the moment she was asked. Annie appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. The statement was short. It said Annie Brooks did not know Michael Whitmore before the night of the bus incident. It said she did not recognize him, did not request money, did not accept the $1 million check, and only paid his fare because he had no way to pay. It was clean, careful, and somehow too small for what had happened. Annie tapped the paper. "This says what I didn't do." Mrs. Bell nodded. "That is usually how statements work." "That's the problem." Linda turned from the sink. "What do you mean?" Annie looked down at the page. "Everybody keeps asking if I planned something. If I knew who he was. If I wanted money. If I'm lying." She pushed the paper away. "Nobody's asking why that driver thought it was okay to talk to him like that. Nobody's asking why everyone watched. Nobody's asking why $2.25 was enough to decide whether a man got to stay warm." Mrs. Bell studied her with quiet attention. "You want the statement to say that?" "I don't know what I want." Annie rubbed her forehead. "I just don't want to spend my whole life proving I'm not what people already decided." Linda dried her hands and came to the table. "Then don't write scared." Annie looked up. Her mother pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "Be careful, yes. Be smart. But don't let them make your voice smaller, just because they made the room ugly." Mrs. Bell slid her pen across the table. "You can write your own words. The lawyers can make sure they don't hurt you." Annie stared at the pen. At Northwestern, Michael stood in a conference room on the hospital's administrative floor. Far from Ethan's quiet room, but close enough that he still felt tied to it by an invisible wire. Mr. Gaines had arrived in person, carrying 2 folders and the look of a man who had slept in a suit. "The transit authority is willing to review the footage with us this afternoon," Gaines said. "Not release yet." "Review." Michael looked at him. "That means they're afraid of something." It means they are an agency with lawyers. Same thing, often. Gaines ignored that. You need to be calm in that room. I am calm. You are many things right now. Calm is not leading the list. Mrs. Bell had joined by speakerphone from Annie's apartment. He's right, Michael. Michael looked at the phone on the table. Whose side are you on? The side that wants Annie protected, and you not dragged into a competency hearing by your brother before dinner. Richard had called 3 times that morning. Claire had sent one long message full of words like optics, emotional vulnerability, fiduciary concerns, and family intervention. Michael had not replied. Silence was sometimes the only luxury left to a man surrounded by people who mistook access for love. Gaines opened the first folder. Before we go in, there is something else. Frank Mallory has 7 prior complaints in the last 4 years. 3 for verbal abuse. 2 involving elderly passengers. 1 involving a teenager removed from a bus after a pass malfunction. 1 complaint alleged racial language, but it was marked unsubstantiated. Michael's face hardened. Unsubstantiated because it didn't happen or because nobody cared enough to substantiate it. That, Gaines said, is exactly the kind of sentence you should not say in the review room. Michael took a breath and looked toward the window. Down below, ambulances came and went. People entered the hospital carrying flowers, balloons, overnight bags, fear. So many thresholds, so many people asking silently to be let through. Fine, he said. I'll let the footage speak first. The review took place at a downtown transit office with gray carpet and a conference table that had seen too many public apologies. Present were Michael, Gaines, 2 transit attorneys, a safety supervisor, a union representative, and a woman from public relations who smiled only with her mouth. Frank was not there. The safety supervisor, a broad-shouldered woman named Denise Harper, handled the laptop. She looked like she had no patience for anyone's performance. We are reviewing internal security footage from Route 63, vehicle 1884, timestamp 8:42 p.m., she said. No recording devices, notes allowed. Michael leaned forward. The video began without sound at first. The bus doors opened. Michael climbed aboard looking worse than he remembered. He saw himself patting his pockets, turning pale, trying to explain. Frank's body language was clear, even without audio. The sharp gestures, the open door, the impatience. Then Harper clicked another file. Audio track synced from front cabin mic. Frank's voice filled the room. No money, get off. Michael did not move. He watched himself shrink under a stranger's contempt. He watched the nurse's medicine fall. He watched Frank accuse him. He watched himself turn to passengers for help, each refusal landing again, though this time he could see the faces more clearly. Most were not sneering. Most were afraid to get involved. Then Annie rose from the back. Michael's throat tightened. The camera caught her walking forward with her hand already in her pocket. It caught Frank looking her over. It caught his words clearly. Another hero. How about you worry about your own hungry stomach first? The public relations woman stopped smiling. Gaines wrote something on his legal pad. Michael watched Annie drop the coins. The camera did not know what they cost, but he did. He knew now. He knew from Linda's table, from the unpaid bills, from the way Annie had taken the 20 as if it weighed more than paper. The last coin fell. The fare inspector said, "Fares paid." No one in the review room spoke. The video continued. Annie helped Michael to her seat. The bus pulled away. Later, she wrote something on a receipt and gave it to him. There was no whispering scheme, no exchange, no plan. Just a girl doing what everyone else had chosen not to do. Harper stopped the video. The room stayed quiet until one transit attorney cleared his throat. "We'll need to assess this internally before any release." Michael turned to him. "Assess what?" "Mr. Whitmore. What exactly remains unclear." The attorney adjusted his glasses. "There are privacy issues. Employee process. Passenger identities. Potential liability." "Liability," Michael repeated. Gaines touched his arm lightly. A warning. Michael pulled his arm away but kept his voice level. "A young woman is being accused publicly because your driver lied publicly. You have footage proving he lied. You also have footage proving she did nothing wrong." The union representative leaned forward. "Driver Mallory has rights too. So did the man he tried to throw into the snow." The representative glanced at him. "That man was you." Michael held his gaze. That should not be why it matters. Denise Harper closed the laptop. We can blur passengers and release relevant portions with legal approval. The PR woman looked alarmed. Denise. Harper did not look at her. The longer we sit on this, the worse it gets. Michael studied her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Harper said. This agency moves like old glue. Gaines slipped a document across the table. Then consider this, the solvent. Formal demand for preservation and release of exculpatory footage related to defamatory public statements. One attorney took it with visible discomfort. Michael stood. You have until 5. That is not reasonable, the attorney said. What happened to Annie was not reasonable. Gaines gathered his folder. We look forward to your response. When they reached the hallway, Michael stopped and leaned one hand against the wall. Gaines looked at him. Are you all right? No. Hospital? In a minute. His phone rang before Gaines could answer. Richard's name lit the screen. Michael almost declined it. Then he answered, Not now, Richard. His brother's voice came smooth and cold. It has to be now. The board is concerned. The board can wait. You disappeared last night, made a spectacle on public transit, offered $1 million to a teenager, and are now threatening a city agency. No, Michael, the board cannot wait. Michael looked down the hallway, where fluorescent lights hummed over scuffed floors. You forgot the part where a decent girl is being smeared by a driver who lied. Richard sighed. This is exactly what I mean. You are personalizing an incident because you are under unbearable stress. My son is sick. That does not make me stupid. No one said stupid. We are saying vulnerable. Way? Claire and I, several directors, we think you should step back temporarily. Michael laughed once, low and without warmth. There it is. Don't be dramatic. You waited until Ethan got worse, then dressed ambition up as concern. Richard's voice sharpened. Careful. No, you be careful. I know the difference between family and management. Do you? Because from where I sit, you're risking both for a girl you met 24 hours ago. Michael turned toward the window at the end of the hall. Snow moved beyond the glass, slow and indifferent. That girl gave me more loyalty in one bus ride than some people with my last name have shown in years. Richard went silent for a beat. Then he said, We'll discuss this at the emergency board session tomorrow. You can discuss whatever you like. You should bring counsel. I always do. Michael ended the call. At Annie's apartment, Mrs. Bell's phone buzzed with a message from Gaines. Footage confirms everything. They're stalling release. Board pressure escalating. She read it twice. Annie noticed. Bad? Complicated. That means bad with paperwork. Linda gave a dry laugh from the kitchen. Mrs. Bell looked at Annie. The footage proves your account. Annie did not smile. So now people will stop? Mrs. Bell hesitated. Annie nodded. That's what I thought. Her rewritten statement lay on the table. It was only a few lines in her own handwriting. I did not know Michael Whitmore when I paid his fare. I did not know he was rich. I saw a man being humiliated because he had no money in his hand. And I had enough to help. I hope people ask why kindness looks suspicious only when certain people give it. Mrs. Bell read it again. This is strong. Is strong allowed? It should be. That's not what I asked. Mrs. Bell smiled faintly. With a few legal adjustments, yes. Annie looked toward the window. A bus rolled past at the corner, its brakes sighing in the cold. I keep thinking about him standing there, she said. Not Mr. Whitmore. Just Michael. Everybody looking at him like he was already guilty of being in the way. Linda came to the table and set down 3 cups of coffee. That happens every day, she said. Only difference is this time the man had enough money for people to care afterward. Annie looked at her mother. Linda stirred her coffee slowly. Don't look so surprised. I'm glad he's helping. I'm glad he means well. But if that had been a poor man nobody knew, he'd have been in the snow and the bus would have kept moving. No one argued. At the hospital, Michael returned to Ethan's room just as his son was waking again. Ethan's eyes searched his face. You got it? He asked. The footage? Yes. And? You were right. I like when that happens. Michael sat beside him. It shows everything. Frank, Annie, the coins. Ethan's voice softened. Did she look scared? Michael thought of Annie standing at the fare box while Frank mocked her hunger. Yes, he said, but she stood there anyway. Ethan closed his eyes. That's the part people should see. Michael took his son's hand. They will. Ethan opened one eye. Promise? Michael wanted to be careful with promises. Hospitals taught a man how easily promises could become lies. But this one did not belong to medicine. "I promise." Ethan nodded, then drifted back toward sleep. Michael stayed beside him, holding the thin hand of his son while, across the city, lawyers prepared statements, transit officials prepared excuses, and a young woman named Annie Brooks waited for the truth to become louder than suspicion. By 5 o'clock, the transit authority had not released the footage. By 5:30, Mr. Gaines filed the motion. By 6, someone inside the agency leaked a blurred 12-second clip without sound. That was almost worse than silence. The clip showed Annie walking toward the front of the bus and dropping coins into the fare box. It did not show Frank shouting. It did not show Michael begging passengers for help. It did not show the shaking hands or the open door or the nurse's medicine bottle rolling under the seat. Without sound, Annie's kindness looked like a gesture strangers could shape however they pleased. A local news page posted it with the headline, "Young woman pays billionaire's bus fare before $1 million offer." By dinner, the comments were afire. At Linda's kitchen table, Annie watched the clip once, then turned the phone face down. "They cut it," she said. Linda stood at the stove stirring a pot of beans, her jaw tight. Of course they did. Mrs. Bell had gone back to Michael, but her card remained beside the sugar bowl. Annie looked at it, then away. She was tired of needing help from people whose help brought more attention. Her phone buzzed again. "Marcus, don't come to work tomorrow, unless Alvarez says." Reporters called twice. Then Mr. Alvarez, "You are still employed. Don't answer strangers. Eat something." Annie read that one twice because it helped. Linda set a bowl in front of her. "Beans and rice." "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." Annie picked up the spoon. "People think I did it for money. People think whatever lets them sleep without changing." "What does that even mean?" Linda sat across from her. "It means if they admit you were just kind, they have to ask why they might not have done the same. Easier to call you clever than to call themselves cowardly." Annie stared at the bowl. Steam rose between them. "I wish I'd never written my name on that receipt." Linda's face softened. "I know. No, Mama, I mean it. I wish I had paid and walked off and disappeared. Maybe. But disappearing doesn't always save you. Sometimes it only lets other people tell the story." Annie looked up. "And what am I supposed to do? Keep talking until they believe me?" "No. Tell the truth once, clearly. Then let the truth stand there even if fools walk around it." Across the city, Michael sat in a private waiting room at Northwestern with 3 phones on the table and none of them bringing the answer he wanted. Ethan was asleep after a difficult afternoon. His fever had risen, then eased. The doctor had used the word monitoring 6 times, which Michael had learned meant nobody wanted to promise anything. Mr. Gaines stood by the window, reading from his phone. "The leaked clip is already being misused." Michael looked up. "Leaked by whom?" "We don't know yet. We know enough. Someone wanted the public to see a version without Frank's voice." Mrs. Bell entered with her tablet. "Denise Harper just called. She says the full footage was approved for release internally, then delayed by legal review after the leak." Michael stood. "That is not a delay. That is cowardice." Gaines raised a hand. "Sit down before you say something expensive. I am tired of everyone protecting institutions while a girl gets chewed alive. We are not doing nothing." Michael turned toward him. "Then do more." Mrs. Bell spoke before Gaines could answer. "There is one thing." Michael looked at her. "Release your own statement now. Not legal language, not corporate. You. Say what happened. Say what Annie did. Say clearly she did not know who you were." Gaines frowned. "That has risks." "Everything has risks," Michael said. "For once, let them fall on me." Mrs. Bell held his gaze. "Then no polished speech. People can smell polish right now." Michael gave a short nod. "Record it." Gaines looked pained. "No. Ethan asked me to make sure people saw the right part. I can't release the footage yet, but I can release my own face." Mrs. Bell lifted the tablet. "Here?" Michael looked around the waiting room. Beige walls. Untouched coffee. A box of tissues on a low table. A framed print of sailboats meant to calm people who could not be calmed. "Here," he said. "This is where the truth started." Mrs. Bell pressed record. Michael did not sit. He stood with his hospital visitor badge still clipped to his coat and exhaustion plain on his face. My name is Michael Whitmore, he began. Last night, I left Northwestern Memorial Hospital after receiving difficult news about my son. I forgot my wallet and my phone. I boarded a Route 63 bus, confused, frightened, and without fare. He paused, not for effect, but because Ethan's name had risen in his throat. The driver told me to get off. I asked passengers for help. No one helped me. Some had reasons, some were afraid, some looked away. Then Annie Brooks paid my fare with the last coins she had. Mrs. Bell's eyes shifted, but she kept recording. Michael continued. She did not know my last name. She did not know I had money. She did not ask for a reward. She saw a man being humiliated and chose not to let him be thrown into the cold. Any suggestion that she targeted me, manipulated me, or planned this is false. His voice hardened. And to those asking why this matters, I will tell you. It matters because we live in a country where a person can be judged worthless for not having money in their hand, and where a young black woman's kindness is treated as suspicious because some people cannot imagine goodness without an angle. Gaines lowered his eyes, already hearing headlines. Michael did not stop. I offered Annie a gift because I was grateful. Her family has not accepted it. They have asked for dignity, caution, and truth. That should shame many of us, including me. He took a breath. The full bus footage exists. It should be released. Until then, direct your questions to me, not to Annie Brooks, not to her mother, and not to her workplace. She paid a fare. I owe the debt. Mrs. Bell lowered the tablet. No one spoke for a moment. Gaines exhaled. That last sentence will be quoted everywhere. Good. It may also provoke your brother. Michael picked up his phone. He was already provoked by decency. Mrs. Bell sent the video to the communications team with one instruction: post without edits. It went live at 7:12 p.m. At 7:19, Annie's phone started buzzing again. She was at the sink washing her bowl when Marcus sent the first link. Then Mr. Alvarez. Then 3 classmates. Then Mrs. Bell, with a short message. He wanted people to hear it from him. Annie opened the video. Linda stood behind her, wiping her hands on a towel. Michael appeared on screen in a hospital waiting room. He looked older than he had in her kitchen. Not poorer, not weaker exactly, but stripped of the armor that money usually gave people. Annie listened as he said her name, as he said she did not know him, as he told strangers to leave her mother and workplace alone. When he said, she paid a fare, I owe the debt, Linda made a small sound under her breath. Annie locked the phone before the comments could load. Well? Linda asked. Annie leaned against the counter. He didn't make himself look good. No, Linda said. That's why it sounded honest. Annie looked toward the window. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop at the corner. People climbed on, shoulders bent against the cold, each carrying some private weight no driver could see. For the first time all day, Annie felt the story shift. Not enough to free her, but enough to let her breathe. At Northwestern, Ethan watched the video from his bed after Mrs. Bell showed it to him. Michael stood beside him, nervous in a way he had not felt before board meetings or billion-dollar negotiations. Ethan handed the tablet back. You did okay, he said. Michael laughed softly. High praise. You still talk like a CEO when you're trying not to. I'll work on it. Ethan's smile faded. Did you mean it, the debt part? Michael sat beside him. Yes. Then don't make the debt only about Annie. Michael looked at his son. Ethan's voice was thin, but his eyes were clear. Make it about the next person on the bus, too. Before Michael could answer, his phone rang. Richard again. This time, Michael let it ring. Ethan noticed and smiled a little. Good, he whispered. By morning, the full footage had still not been released, but Michael's statement had done what the leaked clip could not. It gave people context. It gave Annie a witness with power. It forced the question beyond one driver and one fare. At 8:04 a.m., the Transit Authority issued a public notice. The full reviewed footage, with passenger identities blurred, would be released by noon. Frank Mallory was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. At 8:11, Richard Whitmore sent a message to Michael. Emergency board meeting. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. This has gone far enough. Michael read it while sitting beside Ethan's bed. Then he typed back, "No, Richard. It has finally gone far enough to tell the truth." At noon, the full footage came out. Not the chopped clip, not the silent version, not the version shaped by strangers who wanted Annie to be either a saint or a schemer. The full video showed the bus doors opening, Michael stepping in with his coat twisted and his hands shaking. It showed him reaching into every pocket, voice breaking as he explained that his wallet and phone were at the hospital. It showed Frank's face in the mirror, hard before the situation had earned hardness. It showed the open door, the snow blowing in, the passengers looking away. It showed Michael asking for help, one person after another, and shrinking each time he was refused. Then it showed Annie standing up. The audio caught Frank's voice clearly. "Oh, great. Another hero. How about you worry about your own hungry stomach first?" That line did more than any press release could have done. It was too cruel to explain away, too personal to hide behind policy. By 12:30, local stations were playing it with the sound on. By 1, the transit authority announced that Frank Mallory would remain on administrative leave pending a full review. By 2, 2 older complaints against him resurfaced. By 3, a woman from Englewood gave an interview saying Frank once put her teenage nephew off the bus after his pass failed in the rain. Annie watched none of it after the first time. She had seen enough. At Rosie's Corner Grill, Mr. Alvarez taped a handwritten sign to the front door. "No interviews, no cameras, buy coffee or keep walking." When a reporter tried to come in anyway, Mr. Alvarez pointed at the sign with a spatula in his hand. "I can read it to you slower if you want," he said. Annie was in the back, stacking clean cups. She had come in because staying home made her feel hunted. Work still felt strange. But at least the plates did not ask questions. Marcus leaned beside the dish rack. "You know you're trending, right? Don't say that word." "What word?" "Trending." He held up both hands. "Fine. You are aggressively circulating." Annie gave him a look. "Too soon?" "Too annoying." He grinned, then softened. "For real though, people are on your side now." Annie placed another cup on the shelf. "That's what scares me. People liking you? People changing that fast." Marcus did not have a joke for that. At Northwestern, Michael watched the footage only once after its release. He had lived it, then reviewed it, then carried it into his dreams. He did not need to watch his own humiliation again to know it was real. What he did watch was the public reaction inside Whitmore Medical Properties. Mrs. Bell sent him summaries every hour. Employees were discussing it in internal chats. Some praised him, some worried about the company being pulled into controversy. Several board members had asked whether tomorrow's emergency meeting would include a discussion of leadership stability. Michael read that last phrase twice. Leadership stability. It was a polished way of saying Richard and Claire thought grief had made him useful to remove. Ethan was sleeping when Michael stepped into the hallway to call Mr. Gaines. "Tell me what tomorrow looks like," Michael said. "It looks like a family ambush wearing corporate shoes." Michael almost smiled. "Specific. Richard will argue you are emotionally compromised. Claire will frame it as concern. A few directors will pretend not to have chosen sides. They may propose temporary oversight of discretionary spending, public statements, charitable commitments, maybe even executive authority. They can propose. They may have votes." Michael looked through the glass at Ethan's room. His son's hand lay outside the blanket, thin and still. "Do they have enough? Not if you remain steady and not if you give them fresh ammunition." "You mean don't yell. I mean don't bleed in the water." Michael was silent. Gaines lowered his voice. "Michael, I know you want to protect Annie. I know this has become personal. It was personal from the moment Frank opened that door. Yes, but tomorrow cannot be only about Frank or Annie. It has to be about judgment. Yours. My judgment is fine. Then show them." The next morning, the boardroom on the 36th floor of Whitmore Medical Properties looked colder than usual. The long glass table reflected the city below. Snow moved between towers. Coffee had been set out in silver carafes, though nobody seemed to be drinking it. Richard Whitmore stood near the windows in a navy suit, speaking quietly to 2 directors. Claire sat at the table with a folder open in front of her, every page marked with colored tabs. Michael entered with Mr. Gaines on his right and Mrs. Bell behind him. Richard turned. "Michael." "Richard." Claire stood and crossed the room, arms slightly open, the way she did when cameras were nearby or when she wanted a room to see her being compassionate. "How is Ethan?" she asked. Michael looked at her. "You can call him and ask." Her expression tightened for half a second. That isn't fair. No, it isn't. The room quieted. Richard cleared his throat. Let's sit. Michael took his place at the head of the table. It was still his chair. That mattered more than he wanted it to. Richard began with a voice built for boardrooms and funerals. We are here because the events of the last 48 hours have raised concerns. Not about your character, Michael. No one questions your compassion. We are concerned about strain, about judgment under emotional distress, about sudden financial decisions, and about public exposure at a sensitive time for the company. Michael leaned back. You rehearsed that. Richard ignored him. You disappeared from the hospital. You boarded public transportation in a confused state. You offered $1 million to a young woman you had just met. You issued a public statement without board consultation. You threatened a city agency. I demanded evidence. You escalated a private incident into a national conversation. Claire folded her hands. And now Annie Brooks is being dragged through that conversation too. Have you considered that your involvement may be harming her? Michael looked at his sister. Yes, more honestly than you have. Claire's mouth hardened. That is unnecessary. So was suggesting she targeted me. I never said that. No, you let others say it because it served your argument. One of the directors, a gray-haired man named Paul Evers, shifted in his seat. Michael, the concern is whether you are making decisions from grief rather than reason. Michael turned to him. Paul, when your wife died, you donated $8 million to cardiac research. Was that grief or reason? Paul looked down. Michael continued. When Claire funded the Arts Center after her divorce, was that instability? When Richard bought half of Lake Forest because he was angry at a zoning board, did we call a competency meeting? Richard's eyes sharpened. Careful. No, let's be fair. Grief moves money every day in rooms like this. It only becomes questionable when the money moves towards someone people don't think belongs near it. The room went still. Claire said softly, Are you accusing this board of racism? I'm accusing this board of comfort. Racism often lives there because comfort gives it a place to sit down and sound reasonable. Mrs. Bell looked at the table, hiding the smallest breath of approval. Richard placed both hands on the chair in front of him. This is exactly the problem. You are turning governance into moral theater. Michael stood. No. Frank Mallory turned a bus into a courtroom. The internet turned Annie into a defendant. You turned my grief into an opening. He looked around the table. I am the only one here calling things by their name. Gaines slid a folder in front of each director. These are independent evaluations, Michael said. Medical and psychological. I requested them yesterday. They confirm I am competent to manage my affairs and execute financial decisions. These are the gift documents Mr. Gaines prepared. Annie Brooks has not accepted the $1 million check. These are the legal notices sent to the Transit Authority. Every step has been documented. Richard did not touch the folder. Michael looked directly at him. You wanted me unstable. I came prepared. Claire's voice cooled. Prepared does not mean wise. No, but neither does cautious. Paul Evers opened the folder. Others followed. Michael remained standing. I will not step back. I will not surrender spending authority to relatives who discovered concern only after they saw an opportunity. And I will not apologize for defending a young woman whose only mistake was being kind in public. Richard sat slowly. And the company? The company will be fine. You don't know that. I do, because if Whitmore Medical Properties cannot survive its founder telling the truth about a bus fare, then it is weaker than I built it to be. For the first time, no one answered. Then Claire looked up from the documents. What are you planning, Michael? He did not sit. I'm planning to do what Ethan asked me to do. Richard's expression changed at the mention of Ethan. Not grief, exactly. Irritation at a name he could not attack without looking monstrous. And what is that? Claire asked. Michael looked toward the windows. At Chicago spread below them. Hospitals, bus routes, neighborhoods, divided by money, and yet tied together by the same winter. I'm going to make sure this is not only about one driver being cruel and one girl being kind. I'm going to build something that answers the question everyone keeps avoiding. Paul Evers closed the folder. Which question? Michael turned back to the table. Why did Annie Brooks have to be the only one who stood up? Michael's question stayed in the boardroom after he left. It followed Richard to the window, where he stood with his back to the others, pretending to study the city. It followed Claire as she gathered her folders too carefully. Every colored tab aligned. It followed Paul Evers, who had not said much after opening the competency documents. Some questions made noise when they were asked, others made silence. Michael did not wait for permission to leave. He walked out with Mr. Gaines and Mrs. Bell, his step steady until the elevator doors closed. Only then did his shoulders drop. Mrs. Bell saw it. Hospital? Yes. Mr. Gaines checked his phone. Before you go, you should know Richard is not finished. He will call individual directors. Claire will call donors. They will try to frame your plan as emotional overreach. Michael stared at the elevator numbers descending one by one. Let them. That answer has cost men empires. Maybe some empires need to cost something. Gaines gave him a long look. That sounds noble. It also sounds like a man who has not eaten. Mrs. Bell reached into her bag and pulled out a wrapped turkey sandwich. He hasn't. Michael almost refused, but thought of Annie, of Linda, of the way pride could become another form of foolishness. He took the sandwich. Thank you. Mrs. Bell's eyebrows lifted. You're learning faster today. He ate half of it in the car on the way to Northwestern. It tasted like cardboard and mustard, but it kept his hands from shaking. At the hospital, Ethan was awake, a blanket pulled up to his chest, watching an old basketball game with the sound low. His face brightened when Michael entered, though the brightness did not last long. Illness had made every expression expensive. You win? Ethan asked. Michael sat beside him. Nobody wins in board meetings. That means you won. Mrs. Bell stepped in behind him with a small smile. He survived. Ethan looked at her. That means everyone else lost. Michael leaned back. You're enjoying this too much. I'm in a hospital bed. Let me have boardroom gossip. Michael told him only part of it. Not every insult. Not every maneuver. Enough for Ethan to know that Richard and Claire had tried. And failed. To make grief look like incompetence. Enough for him to know that Annie's name had not been traded for control. Ethan listened with his eyes half closed. And the thing? He asked. What thing? The thing you said you were going to build. Michael hesitated. I don't know exactly yet. Ethan turned his head on the pillow. Then start with the bus. The bus? People miss treatment because they can't get there. You know that, right? Michael did know it. In the abstract way rich men knew statistics. He had seen reports. Missed appointments. Transportation barriers. Low-income patients delaying care, but reports had never stood in front of him with empty pockets. I know, he said. No, Dad, you read it, Annie knows it. That landed cleanly. Ethan continued. Ask her. Michael looked at his son's thin hand resting on the blanket. Ask Annie? If you're building something for people like her, maybe don't build it without her. Michael nodded slowly. That may be the smartest thing anyone has said all week. I'm charging consultant fees. Michael laughed, but Ethan's eyelids had already begun to lower. Across town, Annie was trying to survive an ordinary afternoon that had stopped being ordinary. She had gone back to class because Linda insisted that hiding was not the same as resting. The classroom at Harold Washington College smelled of dry erase markers and burnt coffee from the vending machine. Annie sat in the third row, notebook open, pen ready, trying to listen to a lecture on American government. The professor, Mrs. Callahan, was discussing civic responsibility. Annie almost laughed at the timing. Democracy, Mrs. Callahan said, depends not only on laws but on habits. The habit of participation. The habit of speaking when silence would be easier. A few students turned their heads toward Annie. She kept her eyes on her notebook. After class, Mrs. Callahan asked her to stay back. Annie braced herself. The professor was in her late 60s, with silver hair cut short and reading glasses on a chain. She had the calm voice of someone who had taught through wars, recessions, elections, and every version of young people pretending they did not care. I won't keep you long, she said. I just want to ask whether you're all right. Annie almost gave the automatic answer. Fine. But she was tired of that word. No, she said. Mrs. Callahan nodded as if that was a respectable answer. Do you need time away from class? I need people to stop whispering. That one I can help with. Annie looked up. Mrs. Callahan stepped to the classroom door and spoke to the few students lingering in the hall. Anyone who has questions about Miss Brooks may write a paper on public ethics. Due Monday. Otherwise, I suggest you find a more useful hobby than gossip. The hallway cleared. Annie stared at her. Mrs. Callahan came back to the desk. I have been waiting 40 years to say something like that. Despite herself, Annie smiled. The professor's face softened. You did not ask for attention. I understand that. But attention has arrived. You have the right to decide what your own act means before others decide it for you. I don't know what it means. That is honest. Annie closed her notebook. I just didn't want him thrown off. Then perhaps start there. When Annie left the building, a young woman from her class caught up with her near the stairs. Her name was Keisha, and she usually sat in the back. Hey, Keisha said. I didn't say anything in there because I didn't want to make it weird. It's already weird. Yeah, Keisha adjusted her backpack. My grandma saw the video. She said, tell you she's proud. Annie blinked. Your grandma doesn't know me. She said she knows enough. That sentence stayed with Annie on the train platform, then on the bus home. This time she paid with the 20 Michael had left, and the fare felt heavier than the coins had. At home, Linda was folding laundry on the couch. The television was on mute, showing Michael's face beside a headline. Annie turned it off before sitting down. Linda did not object. How was class? Mrs. Callahan threatened homework for gossip. Good woman. Keisha's grandma is proud of me. Linda folded a towel. Grandmas often have sense before the rest of the world catches up. Annie leaned her head back against the couch. Mr. Whitmore wants to build something. Linda paused. Who told you? Mrs. Bell texted. Asked if we'd be willing to meet. Not at his office. Somewhere neutral. She said Ethan suggested they ask me. Linda's hands stilled at the boy's name. His son? Yeah. What do you think? I think I don't know how to advise a billionaire. Linda stacked the towel carefully. You know how to ride a bus while broke. That may be the education he lacks. Annie looked at her mother. You think I should go? I think you should not go alone. That means yes? That means I'm coming. The meeting happened the next evening in a public room at the Harold Washington Library, chosen by Linda because it had security, witnesses, and no velvet chairs that made poor people feel like they had to apologize for sitting down. Michael arrived without cameras, without Richard, without Claire. Mrs. Bell came with him. Mr. Gaines waited near the back, legal pad closed until needed. Annie and Linda sat across from them at a plain wooden table. Michael looked tired, not bus night broken, but worn down in a quieter way. Thank you for coming, he said. Linda nodded. Annie said your son suggested this. He did. Smart boy. Michael's throat moved. Yes. Annie watched his face and decided not to ask whether Ethan was improving. People asked that when they wanted comfort more than truth. Michael placed no check on the table this time. No envelope, only a notebook. I want to create a foundation, he said. Not a publicity gesture, something useful. Transportation for patients. Emergency fares. Legal help when people are mistreated. Maybe heated shelters near hospitals and neighborhoods where people wait in the cold. Annie listened. I don't want to build it wrong, he said. Ethan told me to ask you. Annie looked down at her hands. I'm not an expert. Linda said. Tell him anyway. Annie took a breath. Don't make people prove they're desperate enough before you help them. Michael wrote that down. Don't put the office somewhere nobody poor can get to. He wrote that too. Don't make it only online. Some people don't have good internet. Some older folks don't trust forms they can't hold. Mrs. Bell was writing now. Don't call it charity like people should be grateful to breathe. Call it something about dignity. Michael looked up. Annie met his eyes. And don't make me the face of it unless I say yes. I'm tired of being turned into a symbol before people ask if I'm okay. Michael put down his pen. You're right. Linda leaned back slightly. That may be the most useful sentence you've said since we met. Mrs. Bell coughed into her hand to cover a smile. Michael accepted it. Then I'll say it again when needed. Annie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then froze. Linda noticed. What? Annie turned the screen toward her mother. A message from an unknown number. You think the billionaire will save you? Wait till people find out what your mother owes. Linda's face went cold. Michael saw the change across the table. What happened? Annie locked the phone. Nothing. Linda's voice was low. Not nothing. Michael did not reach for the phone. He had learned that much. May I help? Annie looked at him, anger and fear mixing in her eyes. This is what help keeps doing, she said. It makes more people look. Michael absorbed the words. Then Mr. Gaines stood from the back of the room. Miss Brooks. If someone is threatening you or your mother, that is no longer gossip. That is harassment. Annie closed her eyes. Linda put a hand over her daughter's. Michael spoke quietly. You don't have to let me fix your life. But please let us protect your right to live it. For a long moment, Annie said nothing. Outside the library windows, buses moved along State Street, their lights bright against the dark. Finally, she slid the phone across the table. Then start with this, she said. And don't make it louder than it has to be. Mr. Gaines took Annie's phone without touching the screen at first. He set it on the table between himself and Linda, then took a pair of reading glasses from his jacket pocket. The gesture was small, almost old-fashioned, and it slowed the room down. Annie appreciated that. She had grown tired of people grabbing at her life as if urgency gave them permission. May I open the message? He asked. Annie nodded. He read it once, then again. His face did not change much, but his mouth tightened at one corner. This number is masked, he said. Could be a temporary line, could be an app. We can trace it with the proper request. Linda sat very still. They mentioned what I owe. Yes. Rent? Possibly. Linda's eyes moved to Michael. I told you money brings company. Michael did not defend himself. You did. Annie hated the look on her mother's face. Linda Brooks had survived too many things by keeping private matters private. Bills under a salt shaker. Late notices folded twice before going into drawers. Phone calls taken in the bedroom with the door half closed. Poverty was hard enough when it was quiet. Dragged into daylight, it became another kind of nakedness. Mrs. Bell leaned forward. Miss Brooks, do you know who might have access to that information? Linda gave a humorless laugh. Half the world if they know where to look. Landlord's office. Collection calls. Old applications. People talk. Mr. Gaines placed the phone back on the table. This is no longer only about reputation. Someone is attempting to intimidate you. Annie looked toward the library windows. Outside, people crossed the sidewalk under yellow streetlights, their coats pulled tight, their lives untouched by the message glowing on her phone. What happens if we report it? She asked. We document everything, Gaines said. We notify the platform and carrier. If there are more threats, we involve law enforcement. Quietly, as requested. Linda's jaw tightened at the phrase law enforcement. Michael noticed. Only if you agree. Linda turned to him. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. Meaning it doesn't make the world safe. No, Michael said. It doesn't. That answer sat better than a promise would have. Annie took her phone back and slipped it into her pocket. I'll save everything. But I don't want police at my door. Not unless we have to. Understood, Gaines said. Michael looked at the notebook in front of him, the one where he had written Annie's suggestions. Do not make people prove they are desperate enough. Do not build it where poor people cannot reach it. Do not make me a symbol without asking. He added another line. Protection without spectacle. Annie saw him write it. What's that? Something I should have understood before tonight. Mrs. Bell checked her phone, then looked at Michael. Richard has called twice. Let him call. He sent a message too. Michael held out his hand. She passed him the phone. He read in silence. Claire and I strongly advise you not to involve Miss Brooks in any foundation planning until the board reviews liability exposure. You are exposing the company, the family, and yourself. Michael handed the phone back. Annie watched his face. This is your brother? Yes. He doesn't like me. He doesn't know you. That never stopped anybody. Linda gave a quiet, bitter sound of agreement. Michael closed the notebook. The emergency board session reconvenes tomorrow. They want to stop this before it becomes real. Mrs. Bell corrected him gently. They want to control it before it becomes real. What's the difference? Annie asked. Mrs. Bell looked at her. Stopping something means killing it. Controlling it means letting it live only if it behaves. Annie leaned back. Sounds familiar. Michael heard the exhaustion under her words and hated how much his world had added to it. You don't have to come tomorrow, he said. Annie looked at him. Come where? The board meeting. I wasn't going to ask. It's not fair to put you in that room. Then why say it? Because if you are not there, Richard will talk about you like an idea. If you are there, he has to see you as a person. But that is a burden, and it is not yours unless you choose it. Linda folded her arms. What kind of room? Michael almost smiled. The expensive kind that pretends not to be hostile. That tells me nothing, Mr. Gaines answered. Whitmore Medical Properties headquarters. Board members, attorneys, Mr. Whitmore's siblings. Likely Foundation counsel. No press inside. Security controlled. Linda looked at Annie. No. Annie turned. Mama. I said no. I heard you. Then don't use that tone like you're shopping for another answer. Annie lowered her voice. They're already talking about me. And you don't owe them your face. No, but maybe I owe myself my voice. Linda looked away first, and that told Annie the sentence had landed. Michael spoke softly. If you come, you can leave at any time. You do not have to speak. You do not have to answer questions from anyone except through counsel. Counsel, Annie repeated. Listen to me. 2 days ago I was worried about being late to work. Now I have counsel. Mrs. Bell said, that is not a sentence anyone should have to say because they paid a bus fare. Annie looked at her. But here we are. They agreed to meet the next morning in the lobby of Whitmore Medical Properties. Linda would come. Mr. Gaines would represent Annie's interests for that meeting only, unless she chose otherwise. Annie made him say that twice. When Michael stood to leave, he did not offer his hand across the table. Something about the night had taught him not every gesture of gratitude belonged to him. Thank you for trusting us with the message, he said. Annie shrugged. Don't make me regret it. I'll try not to. Linda walked them to the library entrance. Before Michael stepped out, she stopped him. Mr. Whitmore. He turned. Yes, ma'am? My daughter is not your redemption story. The sentence hit him clean in the chest. Linda continued. She is a person. She has school. She has work. She gets tired. She gets scared. You want to build something good, fine, but don't build it out of her peace. Michael nodded slowly. You're right. Linda studied him. You say that a lot. I've been wrong a lot. For the first time, Linda almost smiled. That may be the first rich man answer I've liked. The next morning, Annie stood outside the Whitmore Medical Properties tower and looked up until her neck hurt. The building rose into a pale Chicago sky, all glass and steel, reflecting clouds too clean to belong to the streets below. People in wool coats moved through revolving doors with coffees in one hand and phones in the other. Nobody looked lost. That was the trick of places like this. They made uncertainty look like a dress code violation. Linda stood beside Annie in her best navy coat, the one she wore to church funerals and parent meetings. You ready? Linda asked. No. Good. Means you're paying attention. Michael met them in the lobby, not with a crowd, not with photographers, but with Mrs. Bell and Mr. Gaines. He looked relieved when he saw them. Miss Brooks. Miss Brooks. Linda nodded. Mr. Whitmore. Annie noticed security guards watching from near the desk. Not hostile, exactly, but curious. One of them recognized her. She saw it in the quick lift of his eyebrows. Michael saw it too. He turned to the guard. Good morning, David. Good morning, sir. Miss Brooks and Miss Brooks are my guests. They are to be treated as such by everyone in this building. David straightened. Yes, sir. Annie did not know whether to feel grateful or embarrassed. Maybe both. In the elevator, no one spoke until the doors closed. Annie looked at the numbers climbing. Do people ever get tired of being this high up? Michael glanced at her. I used to think higher meant safer, he said. And now? Now I think it just makes it easier not to hear people on the sidewalk. Linda murmured. Michael looked at her. Was that agreement or warning? Both. The boardroom doors opened before they reached them. Claire Whitmore stood in the hallway, dressed in cream, her hair perfect, her smile careful. Michael, she said. Then her eyes moved to Annie and Linda. You brought guests. Michael's voice stayed calm. I brought the person everyone keeps discussing. Claire extended a hand to Annie. Miss Brooks, I'm Claire Whitmore. I'm sorry for all the attention you've been receiving. Annie shook her hand because Linda had raised her with manners, but she did not miss the shape of the apology. It sounded like regret for weather. Thank you, Annie said. Claire turned to Linda. Miss Brooks. Linda shook her hand once. Morning. Richard appeared behind Claire. He looked at Annie for less than a second before addressing Michael. This is inappropriate. Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice. No, Richard. What was inappropriate was holding meetings about her while pretending she was not a person. Richard's eyes narrowed. This is a corporate governance matter. Annie surprised herself by speaking. Then why is my name in it? Richard finally looked at her fully. For a moment, nobody moved. Mr. Gaines cleared his throat. Shall we begin? Inside. The boardroom was colder than Annie expected. Not in temperature, but in arrangement. Long glass table, leather chairs, water bottles lined, like evidence. A view of the city spread behind the windows, too far below to interrupt anyone's conscience. Michael remained standing until Annie and Linda sat. Then he took his place at the head of the table. Richard opened a folder. Before we proceed, I object to Miss Brooks's presence. Annie's hand tightened around the edge of her chair. Michael did not look away from his brother. Objection noted, he said. Overruled. Richard's mouth tightened, but he sat down. For the first time since Annie entered the building, the room had to accept that she was not a rumor, not a headline, not a problem being carried in a folder. She was a young woman in a borrowed calm, sitting beside her mother, watching powerful people decide how much truth they could afford. Michael opened the meeting without looking at his notes. You all saw the footage, he said. You heard Frank Mallory. You saw Annie Brooks pay my fare. You saw that she did not know me, did not ask for money, and did not create this circus. So before we discuss foundations, liability, or public image, I want this room to say one thing clearly. She did nothing wrong. No one answered. Annie looked at the table. There it was again. That polished silence she had come to recognize. It was different from the silence on the bus, but it lived in the same family. Michael waited. Paul Evers finally cleared his throat. Miss Brooks did nothing wrong. A woman near the end of the table, board member Janet Lowell, nodded. Agreed. One by one, others followed. Some sounded sincere. Some sounded like they were signing a form. Richard did not speak. Claire looked at him, then said quietly, She did nothing wrong. Michael turned to his brother. Richard leaned back. I don't believe I said she did. Annie felt Linda shift beside her. Michael's voice stayed level. You allowed others to imply it because it helped you question my judgment. Richard smiled without warmth. No, Michael. Your judgment questioned itself. $1 million check to a stranger, public accusations against a city employee, pressure on a transit agency, and now a proposal for a foundation no one has reviewed. Annie looked up. I didn't take the check. Richard glanced at her. That is not the point. It is to me. The room went still. Richard seemed annoyed that she had spoken again. Miss Brooks, with respect, this is a governance discussion. With respect, Linda said, before Annie could answer. You keep saying that like it makes people disappear. Claire folded her hands. Miss Brooks, no one is trying to erase anyone. We are trying to prevent emotional decisions from creating long-term damage. Linda looked at her. Long-term damage to who? Claire paused half a second too long. Michael answered for her. To the family name, to control, to the comfort of not being asked what our money is for. Richard set his folder down. This is absurd. No, Michael said. Absurd was me owning buildings attached to medical care and never asking how many people missed appointments because they couldn't afford the ride. Absurd was a bus full of adults watching a man get thrown out and waiting for a girl with empty pockets to do what they wouldn't. Annie did not want to feel the room turn toward her, but she did. Michael continued. Ethan asked me not to make this only about one driver. He was right. At the mention of Ethan, Claire's face softened in a way that looked almost real. How is he today? Michael looked at her. Sick. The single word ended the polite performance. Mr. Gaines slid packets across the table. The proposal before you is the initial structure for the Last Coin Foundation. Independent governance. Separate from Whitmore Medical Properties operations, but funded through Mr. Coin Foundation, Whitmore's personal assets and voluntary corporate partnership agreements. No company funds will be transferred without board approval. Richard opened the packet. The last coin? Michael looked at Annie. If Miss Brooks objects to the name, it changes. Annie blinked. She had not expected to be asked in the room itself. I don't object, she said slowly. As long as people understand it's not about making poverty sound pretty. Michael nodded. Then we make that clear. Mrs. Bell outlined the Foundation's first programs: emergency transit cards for patients and caregivers, bus fare grants through hospital social workers, A hotline for riders mistreated or falsely accused on public transit. Partnerships with diners, churches, senior centers, community colleges, and clinics. Heated shelters near hospitals and underserved bus stops. Small food stipends for students and workers caught between paychecks. Janet Lowell leaned forward. This could be significant if managed properly. Richard gave her a sharp look. It could also become a public admission that our existing facilities failed low-income patients. Michael turned to him. They did. That is a reckless statement. It is a true one. Paul Evers tapped the packet. Michael, what exactly are you asking the board to approve today? Nothing you can block for the sake of blocking. The foundation begins with my personal contribution. The board will later review partnership options. Today I am informing you of its creation and inviting those with a conscience to help shape it. Richard laughed under his breath. So this meeting is theater. Annie surprised herself by saying, No. Theater has rehearsals. This feels more like people finding out the script changed. Linda looked at her daughter with something close to pride. A few directors glanced down to hide smiles. Richard did not. He closed the packet. Miss Brooks, you seem intelligent, so let me be direct. Do you understand what happens when a young woman in your position becomes attached to a man of my brother's wealth during a time of family crisis? Annie felt Linda's hand touch her wrist under the table. Michael's eyes went cold. Richard, no, she should hear it. People will use you. Reporters, activists, lawyers, maybe Michael himself without meaning to. You will become an emblem. Emblems get polished, then discarded. The words were cruel because part of them was true. Annie looked at him for a long moment. You're right about one thing. Richard waited. People will use me if I let them. She sat straighter. That's why I told Mr. Whitmore not to make me the face of anything unless I say yes. That's why my mother is here. That's why Mr. Gaines is putting things in writing. But don't pretend you're warning me because you care what happens to me. You're warning me because I make it harder for you to call this just business. Claire looked down. Richard's face reddened slightly. Annie continued. Quieter now. I didn't come here to be polished. I came because people keep saying my name in rooms I'm not in. The room held that. Michael did not rescue her from the silence. He let her words stand. Then Janet Lowell spoke. I support further development of the foundation structure. Paul Evers nodded. So do I. With proper oversight. Richard looked around the table, realizing the room had shifted a few inches away from him. Claire closed her folder. I still have concerns. Michael looked at her. Have them, write them down, but don't dress them up as concern for Annie unless you are willing to listen when she speaks. Claire met Annie's eyes then, perhaps for the first time without the shield of manners. I'm sorry, Claire said. Annie did not rush to accept it. For what? Claire swallowed. For speaking about you before speaking to you. Linda gave the smallest nod, as if that was at least a full sentence. Mr. Gaines marked something in his notes. Then we have a path forward. Richard stood. You have a path toward chaos. Michael stood too. No. Toward accountability. It only feels like chaos because the wrong people are finally uncomfortable. Richard gathered his papers. This is not over. Michael looked at him with a tiredness deeper than anger. For once, I hope not. The meeting ended without applause, without reconciliation, without anyone pretending the family had healed. But something had been decided that no vote could fully capture. The foundation would exist. Annie's name would not be used without her consent. Linda would sit on the community advisory board. Mrs. Bell would coordinate with clinics, churches, and transit advocates. Mr. Gaines would protect the structure from becoming a vanity project or a corporate shield. In the elevator afterward, Annie leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Linda touched her shoulder. You all right? No. Michael stood across from them. I'm sorry. Annie opened one eye. You apologize a lot. I've had practice recently. That almost made her smile. The elevator descended through the tower. Floor numbers blinked down like a countdown back to real life. When the doors opened into the lobby, a security guard held one door clear for them. Outside the glass entrance, reporters waited on the sidewalk, cameras pointed toward the building. Annie stopped. Michael turned to Mrs. Bell. No statement. But Annie kept looking at the cameras. Linda leaned close. Baby, you don't have to. I know. Annie adjusted the strap of her backpack. Her hands shook a little, but she did not hide them. She stepped outside with her mother on one side, and Michael, a respectful step behind her. Questions flew at once. Annie, did you accept the money? Are you working with Mr. Whitmore? Was this about race? Do you blame the driver? Annie waited until the noise broke against itself. Then she said, I paid a bus fare because a man needed help. That should not be hard to understand. The cameras quieted. She continued, if you want to ask something important, ask why people with less are expected to give more. Ask why kindness becomes suspicious when it comes from someone poor. Ask why the driver's first instinct was to throw a man into the snow instead of ask if he was all right. No one interrupted now. I'm not a hero, Annie said. I was hungry that night. I was tired. I was scared. I helped anyway. That's all. She turned and walked toward the waiting car with Linda. Michael stayed behind just long enough to face the cameras. The Last Coin Foundation begins today, he said. And Annie Brooks does not owe any of us another explanation. Then he followed them, leaving the reporters with their questions, the city with its buses, and the first real shape of a debt that money alone could never repay. The first office of the Last Coin Foundation did not look like something built by a billionaire. That was Annie's condition. No marble lobby, no giant portrait of Michael, no silver plaque with a donor's name large enough to make the work feel small. The office sat on the first floor of an old brick building 2 blocks from a bus transfer point and 3 blocks from a clinic where people lined up before sunrise. The windows faced the street. The front door opened without a guard asking anyone why they had come. Linda approved of that. People in trouble should not have to feel inspected before they ask for help, she said on the first day. Michael wrote that down too, though Annie had started teasing him for writing down everything her mother said. The foundation began with folding tables, donated chairs, a coffee maker that burned everything by noon, and a stack of transit cards locked in a metal cash box. Mrs. Bell handled forms. Linda handled people. Annie handled whatever needed handling, copying IDs, helping older folks fill out applications, walking students through bus routes, calling clinics when appointment times changed, and reminding Michael not to speak like a press release. No one says transportation insecurity at the front desk, Annie told him one afternoon. Michael looked up from a draft brochure. What should it say? Need a ride to the doctor? He crossed out the line. Better. Most things are, when normal people can understand them. Mrs. Bell laughed from behind her laptop. The first week, a grandmother came in with 2 grandchildren and an oncology appointment across town. She had 1 fare card with $3 left on it. The second week, a dishwasher came after missing dialysis twice because his hours had been cut. The third week, a mother from Austin cried because the foundation gave her enough rides to visit her premature baby in the NICU every day until discharge. Michael was there for that one. He stood near the copier, watching Linda slide the transit cards across the desk and explain the route. The young mother kept saying, I can pay it back. Linda answered, then one day help somebody else not miss where they need to be. Michael looked at Annie. She looked back. Don't start crying in the supply area. I wasn't. You were thinking about it. He smiled, but the smile faded before it settled. Ethan had been back in the hospital for 12 days. The foundation grew while Ethan weakened. That was the strange cruelty of that season. Every day something good took root. And every night Michael returned to Northwestern to watch his son fade by inches. Ethan knew about the office. Mrs. Bell brought him photos on her tablet. Linda at the front desk. Annie holding a box of donated winter gloves. Michael trying to assemble a shelf with the confidence of a man who had never read instructions in his life. Ethan laughed at that picture until he coughed. Dad, you look like the shelf is suing you. Michael sat beside the bed. The shelf and I reached a settlement. Did Annie make fun of you? Relentlessly. Good. Ethan's hair had thinned. His wrists were smaller. The hospital bracelet slid too far down his hand unless the nurse tightened it. He hated that. Michael hated noticing it. One evening, Annie and Linda came by after closing the foundation office. Linda carried chicken soup in a thermos, cornbread wrapped in foil, and a stern warning that hospital cafeteria food was not a long-term survival plan. You trying to feed the patient or me? Michael asked. Linda handed him the thermos. Both. Sit down. Ethan looked at Annie. Is she always like this? Worse when she likes you, Annie said. Then I'm honored and afraid. Linda pointed at him with a plastic spoon. Smart boy. For a few minutes, the room became almost ordinary. Michael ate soup from a paper bowl. Annie told Ethan about a man who came to the foundation asking for a bus pass, then stayed 2 hours fixing the jammed office door because he used to be a carpenter. Linda complained that Michael kept buying expensive coffee no one liked. Ethan listened like a boy listening to news from a world he still hoped to rejoin. When Linda stepped out to speak with a nurse, Ethan asked Annie, "Do people still bother you?" "Sometimes." "Because of my dad?" "Because people are people." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like something old people say. I work with your father now. I'm aging fast." Michael, standing near the window, turned. "I heard that. You were supposed to." Ethan's smile tired quickly. He closed his eyes, then opened them again. "Do you regret it?" Annie knew what he meant. "No. You lost your coins. I got new ones. You lost your quiet." That answer took longer. "Some quiet is worth keeping," she said. "Some quiet is just people hoping you don't tell the truth." Ethan looked at his father. "Write that down." Michael did not laugh this time. He came back to the chair and took Ethan's hand. Later, after Annie and Linda left, Ethan grew still. The machines kept their soft rhythm. Snow moved against the window, thin and slow. "Dad," Ethan said, "I'm here. I need you to promise something." Michael's chest tightened. "Anything." "No, not anything. Listen first." Michael leaned closer. "If I don't get better." "Ethan." "Dad." The firmness in the boy's voice stopped him. Ethan breathed carefully. "If I don't get better, don't disappear into work again. Don't become one of those men people are scared to talk to unless they want money. Keep the foundation going. Keep asking Annie and Linda what to do, not because they're perfect, because they know what it feels like to be passed by." Michael pressed his lips together, but his eyes still filled. "I don't know how to do this without you. You're already doing it." "No." "Yes." Ethan's fingers moved weakly against his father's. "That night on the bus, you were trying to get home. Maybe you thought home was the house. It wasn't." Michael lowered his head. Ethan whispered, "Annie paid your fare back to yourself." The sentence broke something in Michael, but not the way the doctor's reports had. Those had crushed him from outside. This opened him from within. "I promise," Michael said. "I'll keep it going. And don't let Uncle Richard name anything after himself." Michael laughed through tears. "That I can promise easily." Ethan smiled, satisfied. His final decline came 3 weeks later. It was not like movies made it. There was no single dramatic alarm that explained what was happening. There were conversations in hallways, doctors using gentle voices, nurses who stayed longer than necessary, and Michael learning that hope could change shape without leaving the room. Claire came twice. Richard came once and stood at the foot of the bed talking too loudly about specialists until Ethan asked him to lower his voice. After that, Richard spent most of the visit answering emails in the hallway. Annie came when Ethan asked for her. She brought a deck of cards and lost 3 games on purpose before Ethan told her he was sick. Not stupid. Linda brought soup again, though Ethan could no longer eat much. He asked her to leave the cornbread anyway because it made the room smell like someone's kitchen. On the last night, Michael sat on one side of the bed and Annie on the other. Linda stood near the window with Mrs. Bell. No one had planned that arrangement. It simply happened, the way real family sometimes forms around a bed without asking permission from blood. Ethan woke near midnight. "Dad?" Michael leaned close. "I'm here." "Foundation?" "It's open. It's working." "Annie?" "I'm here," Annie said. Ethan turned his eyes toward her. "Make him listen." Annie's throat tightened. "I will. Promise. I promise." Ethan looked back at Michael. "You found your way back, Dad." Michael could not speak. He kissed his son's hand. Ethan's breathing slowed before dawn. Michael held him through the last quiet minutes, whispering things that belonged only to a father and his child. When it was over, the room did not explode with grief. It became very still. That stillness was worse. Linda covered her mouth. Mrs. Bell cried without sound. Annie stood frozen until Michael reached blindly toward her, and she took his hand because there are moments when even the wealthy have nothing left but touch. The funeral was held on a cold, bright morning. The church was full of executives, doctors, classmates, foundation workers, hospital nurses, and people Michael did not recognize until Linda whispered, "That's the grandmother from the first week," or Annie said, "That man's the dialysis patient." Richard and Claire sat in the family pew. They looked correct, composed, sealed. Annie sat behind them with Linda. Michael had asked her to sit closer, but she refused. "This is Ethan's day," she had said, "not the Foundation's." After the service, at the cemetery, Michael stood beside the grave while people gave him practiced condolences. Richard told him to take time away. Claire told him the board would understand a temporary pause. Michael looked at them both. "No," he said. Richard frowned. "Michael, no one expects you to work right now. I'm not talking about work." "Then what?" Michael looked past them to where Annie and Linda stood near a bare oak tree, waiting without pushing closer. "I'm talking about keeping my promise." That afternoon, he returned not to the mansion, but to the Foundation office. Mrs. Bell tried to stop him. "Michael, you do not have to be here today." "Yes," he said, unlocking the front door. "I do." The office was quiet. Someone had left flowers on the front desk beside a handwritten card from the grandmother whose grandchildren had made their appointment. Michael read it, then sat in the chair behind the folding table. For a long time he did nothing. Then Annie came in, still wearing her black funeral coat. "You shouldn't be alone," she said. "I'm not." She sat across from him. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Outside, buses sighed at the stop. People got on. People got off. Lives continued with a cruelty that felt almost like mercy. Michael took a small wooden box from his coat pocket and set it on the table. Inside was Ethan's hospital bracelet. "I don't know where to put this," he said. Annie looked at it, then at the metal cash box where the Foundation kept emergency transit cards. "Not away," she said. He nodded. Together, they placed the bracelet in the office's small glass case beside the preserved coins from the fair batch of that night. The coins for the ride that had brought him back. The bracelet for the son who had told him what to do with the life he still had. Michael stood before the case, one hand resting lightly on the glass. "Dignity in motion," Annie said softly, reading the Foundation motto beneath it. Michael closed his eyes. Ethan was gone, but the promise had work to do. Years did not soften the memory of Ethan, but they taught Michael how to carry it without dropping everything else. The Last Coin Foundation grew one practical answer at a time. It bought bus passes for patients who had missed too many appointments. It put heated benches near clinics, where older people used to wait with their collars pulled up and their hands buried under their arms. It paid for late-night rides for students leaving work after the last safe connection had passed. It hired lawyers for riders accused too quickly and heard too late. It opened small offices near hospitals, community colleges, churches, and senior centers because Annie had once said help should be close enough to reach before shame talked a person out of asking. Michael listened more as he aged. That surprised people. The man who once spoke first in every room learned to sit at folding tables while grandmothers told him which bus stops were dangerous after dark. He listened when home health aides explained why missing one transfer could cost them a job. He listened when teenage boys admitted they jumped turnstiles not because they wanted trouble, but because the choice had been fare or food. He listened when Linda told him, "Don't make people grateful before you make them safe." He wrote that down too. Annie changed as well, but not into the symbol people wanted. She finished school, then studied law with a focus on civil rights and public access. She still wore simple coats, still kept her hair tied back when she was working, still hated speeches that made poor people sound noble for surviving what should not have been forced on them. By 25, she could stand in front of city officials and make them uncomfortable without raising her voice. Michael used to watch her from the back of those rooms with a look somewhere between pride and apology. One evening, after a public hearing about transit access for hospital patients, Annie caught him staring. "What?" she asked. "You remind me of Ethan." She looked down, quieter at once. "That's not a small thing to say." "I know." They were standing outside the Foundation's first office. The glass case inside held two objects that visitors always paused before. The mounted coins from that winter night, and Ethan's hospital bracelet. Children asked about the coins. Adults asked about the bracelet. Annie usually answered both the same way. One helped a man get home. The other reminded him what to do after he got there. Michael lived 12 more years after the night on the bus. He did not become perfect. People rarely do. He still lost patience. He still tried to solve some problems with money before remembering to ask what was actually needed. He still had days when grief made him sharp, but he apologized faster. He listened longer. And every January, on Ethan's birthday, he rode Route 63 without cameras, without staff, carrying a pocket full of transit cards he gave quietly to whoever the foundation staff had identified that week. Richard and Claire remained at a distance. They attended events when important people attended. They praised the foundation when praise benefited the Whitmore name. But they never understood why Michael had placed so much trust in Annie Brooks and her mother. To them, Annie remained an interruption in the family story. To Michael, she was the chapter that finally told the truth. His heart failed on a rainy April morning, not dramatically. Not in a boardroom. Not on a stage. He died in his study, sitting in the old leather chair he had stopped using for business calls and started using for reading foundation reports. Mrs. Bell found him just after sunrise. On the desk were three things: a photograph of Ethan, a recent picture of Annie and Linda at the opening of a new community transit center, and the folded diner receipt on which Annie had written her name years before. The will was read 1 week later in the main conference room of Whitmore Medical Properties. Richard arrived first, dressed in black and impatience. Claire came with her husband and a tissue she rarely used. Annie sat beside Linda near the end of the table, not because she felt less important, but because she had learned not to mistake proximity for belonging. Mrs. Bell sat behind them, hands folded, face pale from grief. Mr. Gaines, older now, opened the folder with care. Michael had left Richard and Claire the family shares and trusts already assigned to them. They were not disinherited. Michael had been too honest by the end to pretend they were strangers, but the controlling interest in his personal charitable assets, the old Whitmore headquarters building, and the permanent stewardship of the Last Coin Foundation were left to Annie Brooks, with Linda Brooks named founding elder advisor for life and Mrs. Bell named executive trustee. Richard stood before Gaines had finished the sentence. "This is absurd." Gaines did not look up. "Sit down, Richard. She is not family." Annie had expected the words. They still hurt less than she thought they would, maybe because Michael had answered them long before this day. Gaines unfolded a letter. Michael asked that this be read aloud. Claire closed her eyes. Richard stayed standing. Gaines began, "To my brother, my sister, and anyone who believes blood is the only measure of family, I understand your anger. I do not admire it, but I understand it. You believe Annie Brooks entered my life by chance and took what belonged to you. You are wrong. Annie did not take anything from me. She gave me back what grief, pride, and money had almost destroyed." Annie lowered her eyes. Gaines continued, "The night I met Annie, I had billions in assets, and not one coin in my pocket. I had buildings with my name on them and no idea how to get home. I had a son dying in a hospital bed and a heart already preparing to die with him. A driver saw a problem. Passengers saw an inconvenience. Annie saw a person. Linda reached for Annie's hand. She did not know my name. She did not know I could repay her. She had enough for one fare and gave it to me. That fare did not buy me a bus ride. It bought me time. Time to hear Ethan clearly. Time to build something useful. Time to become less ashamed of the man I had been, and more responsible for the man I could still be." Richard sat down slowly. Gaines's voice softened. "I leave Annie's stewardship, not ownership in the selfish sense. The work belongs to everyone who has ever stood at a fare box short of change while the world decided whether they were worth patience. The money is only fuel. The mission is dignity. Annie understands that. Linda taught it. Ethan blessed it. I merely paid late." Annie covered her mouth, but the tears came anyway. The letter ended with one final line. "Do not measure the gift by the coins. Measure it by what the giver had left after giving." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Claire looked at Annie. Something tired and human moved across her face. The same half-second of regret people often show when it is too late to become generous. "I hope you use it well," Claire said. Annie wiped her eyes. "I intend to." Richard said nothing. He gathered his coat and left without shaking anyone's hand. Life did not end with the will. That was the part stories often hurried past. The foundation kept opening its doors. Michael's old headquarters became the Ethan Whitmore Center for Dignity in Motion. The lobby had no statue. Annie refused one. Instead, there was a public waiting room with warm light, coffee, clean bathrooms, charging stations, and a transit desk staffed by people trained to say, "How can we help you get there?" Before asking for paperwork, in the center of the room stood the glass case. Inside were the coins and the bracelet. Beside them was a small card written in plain language, at Annie's insistence. These coins once paid for a man who had no fare. This bracelet belonged to the son who told him not to waste the kindness. If you need help getting somewhere important, ask at the desk. One winter afternoon, many years after that night on the bus, Annie saw a boy standing before the case. He was maybe 10, with a backpack too large for his shoulders, and a bus transfer folded in his hand. "Miss Annie?" he asked. "Yes?" Why didn't she keep the coins if they were all she had? Annie smiled a little. Children had a way of asking the question adults decorated and avoided, because someone needed to get home. The boy looked at the case. Did he? Annie thought of Michael in his study, of Ethan in his hospital bed, of Linda's hand over hers at the will reading, of a bus door open to the snow. "Yes," she said, but not all at once. Outside, a city bus sighed to a stop. People climbed aboard carrying grocery bags, work boots, canes, backpacks, flowers for hospital rooms, and worries no one could see from a driver's seat. Annie watched through the window until the bus pulled away. A handful of coins had not cured Ethan. It had not erased cruelty from the world. It had not made every passenger brave or every driver kind. But it had interrupted one act of public humiliation, and from that interruption grew a promise, then a foundation, then a place where people came when they were short of money but not short of worth. That was enough for one life to change another, and sometimes that is how justice begins, not with thunder, not with applause, but with someone stepping forward when everyone else stays seated. The lesson of this story is that true kindness is not measured by how much we give, but by what it costs us to give it. Annie had almost nothing, yet she chose to help a stranger when everyone else looked away. Her small act did not just pay for a bus fare. It reminded a broken man that human dignity should never depend on money, race, or status. Sometimes justice begins quietly, with one person refusing to stay seated while another person is being humiliated. In the end, the story teaches us that compassion, when offered at the hardest moment, can change not only one life but an entire community. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.